Okay, we are back here with another Jspeak podcast. Very exclusive, like only a handful. It's very exclusive who we have as guests still. There will be inflation as we do more episodes, but it's still very exclusive. And someone that I wanted to chat with is here with me, which is Emmanuel, aka the Pizza Knight legend. I was just I basically, said the same thing, and then I just started hitting the record button. And we were talking last time I saw Emmanuel was in Sin City, Vegas,
Yeah.
which was what was that? CNFT Con? It must
Yeah,
have.
it definitely. Yeah, I think yeah, that was it. Because we're in the lobby and there was just about everyone else in the lobby as well. It was like super late. It was like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. I think. But yeah, definitely CFCon.
Yeah, well, it was really late, huh? Yeah, man. So when I first I think interacted with you, right? I lost my seed phrase, and
Ooh,
I was yeah, I know well, it was out of my control in a way because I the it was stored. I share this story now because it's good. It was stored in a place where I was living, and where I was living got like moved. Like the place was, like the I stored it at family member's house who moved, right?
okay.
And it was sort of like lost in the move. Now it could
Yeah,
still be there, right? This
yeah,
was maybe a couple of years ago, because this was CNFT Con, not the
right.
last one, 2022. But you were at DC Spark is why I'm telling that story too. But also just make sure people listening, like, hey, always have a backup. Or it's weird now because you had the ledger conversations even since then with just all that security stuff. We don't have to touch on it, but PSA, be careful, make sure you have your seed phrase. Trust me, I've lost mine.
Yeah,
It's always it's weird when you lose it. But you
yeah.
were with DC Spark at the time, and that's why I reached out to just like figure out, hey man, what's like the deal? Is this, and you were kind of explaining some things to me about data scraping and all this stuff, and I tried to, do what I
Yeah,
could.
we're trying to hack your laptop. We're trying to figure out how best we could. Yeah, I don't know. Just find some level of just be able to perform some forensics work and just extract what we could.
Yeah,
So yeah,
it wasn't a big deal. Ended up not being a big deal, but at the time, it was obviously I was trying to just figure out, is there anything that I can do for this, right? I'm
right.
so I reached out to DC Spark, and a guy named Pizza Knight, who's like the nicest. You know, I think you handled that call. In such like a good customer service way, but you also educated me on things that had nothing to do with the situation. And it was just awesome, bro. So like I got that read, then I, met you in person, yada yada. But since DC Spark, I kind of want to get some history. Like, what have you done since then? Because this was, years ago.
This is ages ago. DC Spark is like, it's almost ancient history at this point. Yeah, no, a lot has changed since then. I've mostly operated as a consultant for like past year and a half, maybe even more. I think time moves fast. I lose track.
Yeah.
When I meet people, I just tell people I'm a researcher. That's it. I'm a researcher. But professionally, I've operated as a consultant, worked with just teams I didn't think I would ever get the chance to work with. I was like, oh wow. I've worked with teams at the FCA, that's the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK, the UK's version of the SEC. That was fun. I've worked with recently with EY Pathlon in the blockchain team. We worked on a lot of governance related stuff. That was exciting.
I
Lots of great
bet.
clients.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
bet.
and yeah, that's mostly been it. Other than that, it's just me putting together lots of community events, mini hackathons, and workshops across different ecosystems and just project spaces in general. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Because I've seen some things that caught my eye recently. Like, there's a couple of tweets that were because Cardano was where I had context of you. I think
Mm-hmm.
it was 2021, first time chatting with you. Then 2022, I saw you in person.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, DC Spark, Ancient History. It's 2024 now. You had this consultancy. So, what's interesting though is you've been talking about a few things that I think are kind of high level. And with the Bitcoin ETFs, it's interesting. I just heard Riley Kilgore. He was on we just did a podcast together, and he
Yeah.
told me this really interesting thesis that the Bitcoin ETFs create sort of a framework for on ramps now with other
Mhm.
blockchains with atomic swaps. Is
Yeah.
he's coming?
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought
Huh.
it was pretty interesting too. And we always talk about banks and maybe someone I've heard many conversations where community members on different blockchains are like, why don't we just form our own bank and not have to be in the but on ramps obviously. So then I saw your tweets around base, and I think your bio even, what is it? It's was it JP Morgan, or I think you have a bit of a banking background slash
Yeah.
financial systems background. Yeah, so previously at JP Morgan, that's what I thought. And then shadowy super coder, Emmanuel the pizza night. I love that. And
Yeah, that's just so people know that's mostly because of Elizabeth Warren. It's kind of like a thing to stick the middle finger. It's like, yeah, I guess we're all shadowy supercoders at this point. Yeah.
is like the nicest guy. But well, I just think that the hospitality, customer service, it's there. Like I've experienced it. And yeah, Elizabeth Warren does kind of paint everybody with the same brush, but when it comes to that background, I think that's really interesting. And then when it comes to your context, your unbelievable context in terms of people like Sebastian, exchanging ideas. I've heard you two actually exchange ideas in front of me and just talking about different things. And it was really fun to just listen to you guys, even in Vegas that one time, just as like a fly on the wall. And obviously your context of blockchain, it's pretty expert level. There's no experts obviously, but when I see you mention certain things, it makes me really curious. Like what is sort of, where do your interests kind of lie now in blockchain? And
Mhm.
maybe it's where with you, like where you're doing some work, but also like outside of that, where are your interests kind of like lying, and we can kind of chat about the different things going on. I think would be great.
Yeah. That's definitely a good question. I never really have a script for this kind of question. But
No, no,
in
I don't ever do
yeah.
a script. I can't even really read well off a script, to be honest with you. I can't even do the script for us. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, in some way a lot hasn't changed in terms of like everything that I really came into the blockchain space to look for. So prior to me like doing the whole blockchain and everything, I was still a very tech person at heart. I loved a lot of just love to tinker. Cybersecurity was a big interest point for me. So I was that person who'd spin up like Kali Linux and do all kinds of funny things. So seeing the blockchain space rising, oh wow, it's pretty much like a lot of what I've been messing with, but with more stakes and everything. And just a bit of more practicality too. I thought, okay, that's interesting. But a lot of that bit hasn't changed. But what's improved a bit more is some focus, is some vision. So I'm from a third world developing country, Ghana, and I've seen what it's like to not have a lot of things, to be limited.
Oh, you're
Uh,
from Ghana. I didn't even
yeah,
know that. Okay, so you're from Ghana. Okay, so
yeah.
that's even like that makes, I think that's really interesting. Okay. So yeah, because Ghana, yeah. So how long were you in Ghana, and when did you, because I thought you were in New York, or maybe I'm
I,
wrong.
I I live in New York for the most part, yes. But I'm born and raised Ghanaian. I moved to the US when I was 18, right after secondary school. And I've been here since then. Besides other times you'd probably find me in other cities here and there. So yeah. So I've seen what it's like to be in an ecosystem, in a place where a lot of things that should be there, a lot of provisions that should exist, just don't. And yeah, in parts, in the US, there's a lot that's provided, and there's a lot that gets taken for granted. And I have continuously seen a lot of the work being done in the blockchain space kind of offer an opportunity for my people and my country to benefit in a very impactful way, to leapfrog a lot of what we've been doing. So every time I spend time in this industry, that is fundamentally at the back of my head. How can what can we take back home? What can we kind of repurpose? So yeah, that's just on one side. But on the other side, focus on the industry as a whole and blockchains as a whole. I think that my focus is currently to do two things: evolve the blockchain stack as we know it, into the next iteration that it should get into, the evolution it deserves. So I like to think that the first boom was like Bitcoin, in 2009, it goes live. I think that was the first boom. Second boom was probably like with the proposal of Ethereum and Ethereum going live like a year or two later. I think that was like the second boom. And since then, we've kind of still done a lot of the same things in different ways. We've been chasing after building, better consensus mechanisms. We've been chasing after building, better runtime mechanisms, runtime systems. And we've done a good job. We've got good results from there. We've got Ouroboros, we've got the MoveVM, we've got the sea-level runtime, we've got all these amazing pieces of tech from this time period. But I think that it's time that we shifted into like a more into the next generation. This where the question becomes, okay, I guess that next generation will be more of a third generation blockchain, and that has been my focus for quite a while. The question becomes, what is a third generation blockchain? Now, depending on who you listen to, you're gonna get too many different pitches for what a third gen blockchain would look like.
It's maybe subjective even to a point. Like it can be a little bit, but I want to hear your perspective on it. So like what have you come like to find? What's the wisdom that you've gained from this journey that you bet on, And like
Yeah. I think, and there's been so many learnings along the way, but then I think that which I have come to settle on is that sorry about that. It's traffic outside.
Oh,
Um,
if you're
yeah.
in New York, I mean, gosh, it is like traffic is the like instead of oxygen they have traffic. I heard.
Exactly.
Like,
It's second nature. But yeah, coming back into things, I think what I've settled on is that the next generation of blockchains are blockchains that fundamentally know what they are. When I say know what they are, I mean everything they're composed of is very well addressed, well defined. But then also it's able to take on a kind of a state of living. And when I say that, I mean it's able to better align with the stakeholders within that particular ecosystem. All right. What does this mean? This means that blockchains will have to transition from being these cold machines, these machines that just do what we expect them to do, that we built them to do, into being these machines that can also kind of be malleable. They can bend with us. They can adjust with us, the people, us, the stakeholders. And so with that, I've really come around a lot of focus on governance.
yeah,
I think
have to,
governance
right?
is,
But that's the thing that allows for the malleability. It's like,
yeah,
and that's a tough one, man. I mean,
it is tough.
I've
Yeah,
been looking at a lot of governance things in Cardano, and gosh, it's really interesting what they kind of came up with SIP 1694. But I've been in lots of different debates and talks with around this subject, and
yeah,
listening to folks that have spent um I don't know, the last like 4 years of their career, or even like prior than that, though they have experience that goes decades that led up to the pivotal work of their careers. But it's interesting with that social, like with that human element,
yeah. The social layer. Yeah,
the social layer. That's
yeah,
what they call it, right? It's that
yeah,
social layer.
yeah. I think that right there, that's what will really highlight the third iteration of what blockchains should be like, or how blockchains should function. I know the word blockchain itself is like a bit overloaded, and I tend to be very some sound pedantic about some things. But I tend to be very strict about that. Like there's the blockchain and there's the ledger. All right. And we run our ledgers on the blockchain. The ledger is where the ecosystem exists. That's where your life exists. All right. That's where your balance is. So if you're familiar with the concept of autonomous worlds, you get very interesting perspectives on how to better view a given construct. And I think that's a key thing that we haven't been doing too well in the industry. I'll say some projects within the industry have done better at that than others. I'll always give, the Cardano project its flowers. There's a lot of very proper work that's been done by the team at IO, for better or for worse. I would say that they've done things in a way that serves as a good standard in many ways. And of course, everything has its trade-offs. So I think that the only way to get to that third stage of blockchains is to also properly understand what we're dealing with here. What is a blockchain? Why do we have these tokens? Why are we paying people to like produce blocks? Yada, yada, yada. Who are these people? What roles do they play? Are they more valuable or less valuable than we kind of treat them? If you remember a few months ago, maybe a year ago, I used a certain framework for even stake pool operators, where I said stake pool operators are pretty much just like Uber drivers. Okay, and they just provide a vehicle to do extra work, yada yada yada. And I come along with all these different analogies, but it's very important to understand the construct and the framework, and not all the pieces, but just enough of the pieces that interoperate and function. The couplands, how they depend on each other, what they can do without, so on and so forth. That allows you to know what machine you're dealing with, so that you as a human can know how best to interface with it. And a lot of this thinking and just framework was led me to a little pet project, a little pet thesis, which I've been cooking for a while. I call it the Actualized Ledger thesis, which focuses on pretty much
Actualized Ledger thesis.
Actualized Ledger thesis. Yeah, it's the name would probably change over time. I don't know. I use the word actualized from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's like the final stage, your final form.
Actualization, right?
Yeah. Exactly, that kind of thing. It's like that's when you really know what you are. When you know what you are, that's when you're really capable. You're really capable. You have the ability to do so much. So much more than you conventionally could do. So the Actualized Ledger thesis focuses on activating the ledger with governance protocols, governance gadgets, as some would call them. And this activation allows the ledger to be capable of more things. So I'll give you one example. Today, good, your private keys, perfect, good, boom. I think that's a perfect example. And in a certain way, you lost your private keys. Today, it's like, oh, you lost your private keys. Well, sorry about that. Too bad. There's nothing that can be done about it.
Yeah, it's pretty cut and dry.
Yeah, it's very final.
Private keys. Yeah. I found out personally. And you know what? That feels like death to me. In a very interesting way.
Yeah.
Like, if anybody's ever lost really close family member, right? Or even like their grandma or somebody.
Yeah.
There's a difference between, and I'm sorry to be so morbid about it.
No. This is
analogy that I could possibly come up with.
Right.
It's like one day, it's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna see this person again, but then all of a sudden, everything kind of changes with that relationship, and it's irreversible.
Exactly.
That's the
irreversible loss. That's what it is.
It's an irreversible donation to the holders of whatever you were holding inside your wallet. And that's what Satoshi said. He said if people lose their private keys, I'm pretty sure he's like, I don't want to misquote him, but he said something like that. Like, consider it a donation to humanity if you lose your private keys to Bitcoin, or if you send Bitcoin to the wrong address. Consider it a donation to humanity. But
so something like that's like one perfect example of what you tend to of what you're able to fix if you're able to actualize your ledgers. So for example, today, given the situation where you lost your private keys, you sort of have two options. Well, three options. Option A, well, too bad.
You gave me a few options, man, and I was contacting like a private investigator, data scraper.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
I don't know, man. I didn't, it's funny because you had so much knowledge and I learned so much. But yeah, what are the three options today?
Yeah. And just to add to that, but I think when we had our call that very first time to kind of recover your stuff, I was in like, we need to get this guy his stuff. Like, we need to do everything we can to get him his keys back. So I remember, we really went all out on like our various options. But come back to three options. So option A is, well, it's done. There's nothing you can do about it. Just move on. That's option A.
Okay.
Option B is, I don't know, get the power of the sun and crack the cryptography.
Right.
Okay. And option C is find some way somehow to get all the block producers, all the consensus workers to make a certain kind of adjustment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But
Um
it's,
and
I'm
that's
adopting
very,
Cardano. That's like,
I mean, look at other blockchains. Like look what happened even with the DAO fork. Okay, look what happened with the, you have these cataclysmic events. Should you have to try to do that? But at the end of the day, that third option, that option C, is it's conventionally unattainable.
yeah.
Not unless you're like some very famous glorified human being or something like that. Um,
It's like death, unless you're like,
it's exactly
unless you can, rise up
right.
from the ground and bring
Exactly.
back
Unless
to
you're
life. And
Jesus or
yeah,
right.
unless
Unless you're
you're
Jesus
Jesus,
or whatever.
like
Yeah.
it's gonna be tough to get those private keys back, probably. So with option
Exactly.
C, with option C.
Right, exactly. So that was option C. So that's not a good thing. Okay. And so being a banker, my history in banking, if there's
Right.
anything that I really loved and admired is the concept of recourse, the concept of, finding a way to redress and recover, people, or help people recover. There will be people who'd walk into my cubicle and say, oh my goodness, I just got told to send like $100,000 to this person in this country and I didn't know what I was doing. I'm like, ma'am, you be a-okay, we'll take care of you. All right.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I sit them down, we run the whole process, and a few hours to days to maybe even a week max, we have your funds back. That path for recourse. It's like, oh, I sent Zelle to the wrong place. Can you help me sort this out? I just, I misused this card. Yeah, there was in the traditional finance system, there's always a path to recovery. There's always a path to recourse. And we've chosen in the blockchain space, we've chosen to sort of you know, not consider that path. We've chosen to kind of choose a certain finality to these things. And it's like, oh yeah, this is what it means to be a crypto person, blockchain person. These are the L's we have to take. I'm like, no, we can be better. So in actualizing the ledger, with governance protocols, you're able to have the necessary structures, the necessary policies, the necessary
Wow.
provisions that allow you to do things a little differently. And what does this look like? So for example, I assume that the account to which that particular self-private keys, unlocks, I bet it had some value in it, some assets, some tokens in there, right?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah,
It
right.
wasn't my only thing because my strategy was to have a few different wallets and kind of spread things
As you
out.
should.
So
Yeah.
I actually like, maybe like 1/6 or 1/5 of what I was kind of, I guess,
Right.
having
Right.
in crypto at the time, but still
Yeah.
it was like, I had to like when I accepted it, it
Yeah.
made me such a like I got more invested in the tech. I got way
Yeah.
more invested into topics I never even knew
Hmm.
existed, to be honest.
Yeah.
And it
It,
was
it was
it brought me closer to it in a weird way. It was like alluring that like so I am grateful, but yeah, man, it had some value in it. And
yeah.
I still have the computer. I haven't really touched it since.
Right. Oh
But
wow.
but
Okay.
I'm not gonna like try to chase that. I'm just gonna like
Right. It
forget about it. Whatever happens down the road, maybe one day I'll find that private investigator guy. But back to your
right.
it's kind of like, yeah, if somebody has some value and they, people tell me probably like a few times a year, they'll reach
Mhm.
out and their community members and they're like, hey, I lost my seed phrase. You're a
Yeah.
YouTuber. Do you have any tips and stuff? And it's
Right.
really a tough one, you know?
Yeah.
It's really a tough one because like I know
Yeah. Like,
that
you want to sit down for this?
I know that there's like a tough conversation they're gonna have with somebody.
Yeah.
And when it comes to something like the self-actualizing or actualizing ledger thesis, is there any trade-offs though that like I mean I want to get, I want to give you time to kind of go through this because this is
Yeah.
big in there's multi I've been looking at Radix a lot recently and I've seen some
Okay.
of their um uh they like multi-factor and some of their kind of ways to have account recovery and it's
Right. I'm sure it's in the realm of account abstraction in general.
it's in the realm of account abstraction in general, but what you're
Yeah.
talking about sounds a little bit more novel, to be honest.
Exactly. It's way it's almost heresy.
It seems
Um.
like it, but I want to
Yeah.
understand, like, because you're also, the blockchain.
Yeah.
I know that
And
you come at it from a good place, so I'm
yeah.
curious, bro.
And that's why I had to, initially, just a few minutes ago, I had to say that as you work with these systems, you have to understand how these systems work in their, in their various components and what these various bits and pieces are. So then you realize certain things. So, and by the way, I like to think that, the unfortunate event of your private keys was like a canon event. If you've seen like Across the Spider-Verse, it's like a canon event. It's something that had to happen to make you like much more awesome than you previously were.
No,
So
thank you, man.
if
I
there's
think
like
that's
the
exactly true, though. So I
yeah,
hope people that lose their seat. I don't hope people lose their seat phrase, but I hope the ones that
no,
do uh
yeah,
feel this like I think there is this thing that can be and people that are in crypto for a while
mm-hmm.
always have stories. Sometimes it's
Oh
a
yeah,
scam, sometimes it's a rug pull, sometimes it's losing a
yeah,
seed phrase, but
yeah.
I've met a few people, man, that really
Mm-hmm.
took that and came out of it much better. So like that inspired me because I knew that that existed before I
Yeah,
even lost it. But thank you, man. I appreciate that. And I think it's true. But
yeah.
back to this. Okay, so like we
The
have
Actualized Ledger thesis, yeah.
we have
So,
a big
so
problem, and it's like you got people losing their. You got a lot
mhm.
of money sometimes in these
Yeah,
seed phrases, man. Like
yeah,
lots of money. So
yeah,
especially in bull markets and things like that,
yeah.
it's like
It becomes much more, crucial to at least try to get what you've lost back. And I think this is possible. I think it's possible to, get it back if you do things the right way. The Actualized Ledger thesis focuses on pretty much, taking control of the ledger and kind of giving it the right endpoints, the right provision. So this account, so your private keys unlock an account, or they allow you to spend from a given account. All right. An account is like it's an address plus a piece of state, attached on a given ledger. So at
right.
the end of the day, this private key and this account are still very two different things. All right. The private key is kind of like the song and dance to interact with this account. Okay.
Yeah.
So now that we know that the song and dance cannot be done, what else can be done? What it's a ledger, and the ledger does one thing: it transitions from one state to the other, right? Like if you want to kind of go into implementation, you're like pretty much a ledger is an infinite state machine. It just moves from one state to the other. But I just call it a ledger. And this ledger has balances. This ledger is what defines and kind of exemplifies the world state of a given ecosystem. All right. So if you look at the Cardano blockchain, you look at the entire UTXO set, that's essentially the global state of Cardano. If you look at the state tree in Ethereum, that's pretty much like the world state for Ethereum, that kind of thing. And all these things have balances. And all of these balances, or everything on that ledger has rules with regards to how to interact with them. If you want to spend, there are some rules on how to spend from this account. You need to have the right private key, or you need to have the right script logic, that kind of thing. Those are the rules. That's pretty much the only rule for that. Okay. So the question becomes, how can we throw in another rule that allows you to spend from it in a way that isn't necessarily a script logic, in a way that isn't a private key? And this is where you enter the realm of governance and what I like to call proof of governance. Because at the end, you need to have a certain accountable and credible element or mechanism that transitions the ledger state. Okay, like you can transition ledger state anyhow you like, but then no one's gonna love that. All right. So
Yeah.
if you're able to have if you're able to have a more credible and a very accountable, very transparent third option on how to transition state and specifically how to modify such accounts, you can solve that problem. So what does this look like in the Actualized Ledger thesis? Pretty much you lost your private keys. There's a governance framework for the
This
ledger.
is like the
Okay.
perfectest example, dude. This is crazy how
Yeah.
meta it is because this is the perfectest example. Okay.
Yeah. There's a governance framework. So naturally there's a governance sector ecosystem in that ledger. Um and they have different things, such as, I don't know, your treasury, maybe those who distribute for developer needs, those who distribute funds for catalysts, yada yada yada. You have a security council, those who review upgrades and all these things. You have, I don't know, institutional council. They're the ones who deal with the Coinbases and the Black Rocks and everything. And you have, I don't know, a stakeholder council, those who deal with stakeholders in different parts of the world. So a full-fledged governance framework would have a lot of different provisions. It functions as it's a government.
It's got like
Okay.
trusted institutions, almost like credible institutions that have certain roles. You're saying councils. Yeah.
You have a certain kind of a certain kind of set of institutions.
Are they people or is
So
it
whether
code? Like this is where I
it,
think.
it's a combination of people and code.
Okay,
Okay.
that makes more sense.
And pretty much there are checks and balances, and there's a path for enforceability. There's a path for tamper detection. There's a path for a lot of the things that prevent capture, prevent corruption, prevent censorship. These are things which you're by default looking to institute in your governance framework as you're building your governance framework. All right. So you have people doing traditional looking things, but you don't have to worry about that because there are checks and balances, there are limitations, there are provisions, right? If you want to pass a proposal that moves all the treasury funds into your wallet, there are, checks and balances for that. There are things to check you on that. Exactly.
Yeah.
So essentially what I'm trying to say is that a ledger with a full-fledged governance framework is akin to a government in the real world. Okay. And this government has all sorts of different departments, if you will. So security department, institution department, yada yada yada. In your case, you would need a kind of a recourse department or like a risk department or like a dispute department. All right. And this is the department that you'd write a proposal to that says, hey,
Ooh,
account XYZ is my account. It has $10 million worth of funds. I have unfortunately lost any way to primarily access it. Okay. I would like for that to be a solution. I like for my account funds to be recovered. Okay. Now, from the perspective of the ledger, this only just means that you're zeroing out a given account and you are re-upping another account based on what you've zeroed out. In the case of UTXOs, you're pretty much burning a certain UTXO so you can re-up, another UTXO in some other place. That's what would go on the ledger itself. But at the governance level, you have the people who are looking at a proposal and they probably say, oh, okay, it's going to take us a year, which would make sense in some context. It's going to take a year. It's going to take 6 months. It's going to depend on whatever their risk appetite is like. But let's go with a year. They say, okay, we've seen your proposal. It's going to take a year and it's going to cost you, I don't know, 30% of all the value in there. All right. And in that 1 year, you pretty much have a challenge period, a period where people can come in and be like, no, J Crypto didn't really lose his account. He sold it to someone and he's just trying to play funny. He's just trying to move funds out to an account he already sold or something. Maybe you sold the private keys to someone. I don't know. So you
what
have
about
this.
what if what about this whole thing is interesting when we talk about ledgers. Sorry, I think I have hair in my face. It's like itching my nose. It's gonna make me sick. But when it comes to like a social mechanic or a notification mechanic, and I know that I hear a lot of good arguments for why we don't want text messaging or why we don't want extra data sometimes on because ledgers are ledgers, databases are databases, and it's not like we can't store data in transactions. It's just like how much do we really want to try to store and
Mhm.
preserve. So
Right.
when it comes to sending somebody that owns a wallet some
Mhm.
kind of, hey, look, I know that you're anonymous, but here's like, hey, somebody's saying that this wallet was lost, and the
Mhm.
challenge period could facilitate a certain time where if they don't respond to it, I don't know. It's interesting because like that social, like we don't really have that. We don't really have a messaging like we would in Web 2. I guess people, we still call it email. You lose your password,
Right.
email, you get it, you can redo the password. But there's reasons why we don't have that too, right, Emmanuel? There's reasons why we probably don't have that yet. Messaging services.
Yeah. You're breaking up a bit, but I think we're good.
Oh,
All
okay.
right. Check 1, 2.
Yeah, so it all recorded on my end. So
Yeah.
it was
Perfect.
just me talking. I was just talking about like messaging, things like that that
Yeah.
could communicate directly with a person, even if
Yeah.
they want to remain anonymous. There's reasons why we
Yeah.
don't have that today. What are maybe those reasons too? Like why like
Well, I think the fundamental reason is that we do not know how to do it and do it properly. And so
I
we
agree
just
with that.
haven't tried.
Okay.
And so the question becomes, we have to research how to do this and how to do this properly. I mean, when you submit such a proposal to, let's say, the dispute department or account recovery department of your governance protocol, it shouldn't be anything too different from when you submit a proposal to move funds from a treasury. It's public, okay? There's a dedicated portal for it. There's a dedicated discussion forum for it. And yeah, that's like, the naive setup you'd have. And at that point within that challenge period, yeah, people would have every opportunity to come and say, no, you're lying. You didn't lose your private keys, you sold it somewhere or something like that. But not just that, but then also the idea is that done you have history to that account that in some way is able to be attributed to you. All right. So for example, I see that you have the ape thingy behind your back on your wall. Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
So
community. Yeah. Shoot. It's Why am I forgetting your name? Oh, Carver De Medici gave me this. Thank you, Carver. Very
awesome. That's
he
covered.
makes those to different NFTs as well as the Ape Society, but he's the Ape Society community member. Yeah, so I do have
Yeah.
this, and it was a gift, and it's in here, and it could be maybe tracked back to the NFT on the blockchain. Like, is that where you're going with this?
Well, exactly. We'll assume that you do own that particular assets in your account. Okay. So that's one thing to trace back to you. Maybe you've done certain things. Maybe you've taken, selfies that, you minted. And, if you came for the Cardano events I put together back in 2022, we had a photo booth and everything. And so there are people in Cardano out there who have like photos of themselves in your wallets and everything. So like stuff like that. If you've made on-chain messages, if you have enough footprint and fingerprint, digital footprint and fingerprint, that can say, okay, this is really your account. Okay, something probably did go wrong here. That's what your challenge period is for. That's what your 1 year wait is for people to run those checks to really figure like, okay, should we really do this for him? And if we do go ahead with this, do we give him everything? Okay, like besides like the 30% we're charging him, do we give him the full remainder, or do we even still give him a fraction of that? As a kind of a caution or something. Like, do we burn the other? Well, not burn, but like, do we just isolate the other fraction of that? These are all the considerations that will have to be made. But when all that's said and done, all right, you can have a period in a year where they say, okay, people, we have managed to audit and risk assess all these proposals to recover accounts. These are the ratings we've had. These were the only, accounts which we managed to get very confidence rating. So out of maybe 100 proposals, we got, I don't know, 50 into confidence ratings. Here are all of them. Do we agree to zero out those accounts and re-up another account? Okay. And everyone votes. So those who are supposed to be voting in that particular department, they get to vote, depending on your governance framework. Right. There's some governance frameworks that say everyone votes for everything. There's some which, compartmentalize. So depending on what your process is,
Wait,
at the
wait,
end of the day.
can I throw a take at you from like what I've
Yeah.
listened to so far?
Uh-huh.
So actualized ledger thesis seems like the next step in terms of humanity, tech, and just ledgers. It
Yeah.
feels like this is just taking blockchain or taking ledger technology, DLT,
Mhm.
distributed, and
Yeah.
just instead of trying to have it be completely autonomous, creating just like another level of maturity. I almost feel like in some ways listening to uh, like you speak about these things that we went from our previous ledger technology, the traditional financial system, uh,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it. Uh,
Yeah.
it's sort of we went and shot for the moon with going straight
Yeah.
to autonomy, and we
Yeah.
didn't have any middle step. It was kind of
Yeah.
shocking, I think, for people to
Mhm.
go from this all the way to, hey, there's total self sovereignty. So are you proposing sort of
Mhm.
that almost like evolutionary middle step that maybe it was never even uh I guess aspired towards, or people weren't serious about building that middle step where humans can actually,
Exactly.
participate in this technology more. Yeah, just like participate in it a little bit at least, right? Like just a little bit,
Yeah.
you know?
That's why I called it like a living machine. That's why I said you're pretty much changing blockchains from being these cold machines to being these machines that interface with a social layer that are able to be alive. All right. And in a sense, it does help this construct be more autonomous, if you will. All right. Because now it's able to self-regulate, self-govern. Okay.
Yeah.
We didn't have to go call, I don't know, Experian or whichever, or call EY or anyone to do. You could like these, not that you can't do that, but essentially you didn't have to go to a certain trusted centralized party. Okay, this is something that the ecosystem, the stakeholders can coordinate around. Right, this is social coordination. All right. So yeah, essentially all those proposals are laid out. They then bring it to the forefront. Maybe at the end of every year, there's a particular day at the end of the year that says, okay, it's like a festival even. And people are like, okay, these are the accounts we're about to bring back from the dead or something. And people just vote. They just say, do we do it? Do we not do it? All right. And everyone votes. And at the end of the day, let's assume that they did vote to say, yeah, let's recover those funds for those people. What you get is like pretty much a final proof, a final kind of signature, like an aggregate signature of some sort, right? And I'll just stick with proof, right?
Yeah.
And this proof is what I would call the proof of governance. So as opposed to valid logic and a valid key signature, you now have a valid proof.
Hmm.
All right.
Proof of
So
that governance took place, and
exactly,
have the proof of it, and that proof
exactly.
is what can. Okay, so that's what retrieves. So, what's the reaction you're getting from this? Because I could see how crypto, people. I mean, even myself, like, it's so hard with these things, right? Because
It
I
is.
actually like what you're saying. Like, I actually do. My thing is like, having gone through what I've gone through, I kind of like that I did because I like I do like the responsibility. It's just a lot for most people though. And I think
Mhm.
coming to terms with that is
Yeah.
what, like, even for myself, I would be completely fine if things remain the same, and if you had some sort of account abstraction that, you know,
Right.
had just more security involved. But yeah, I guess for most people, it's probably just maybe too much. I don't know.
Exactly.
I don't know. Like,
So
is that what you think too? Like, I don't
you
even
haven't
know if I
you
think that
have
yet, though, Emmanuel. I don't want to get lambasted
no,
by
no, no, you're perfect. No, dude,
the
you
masses
haven't.
of crypto bros, but it is heresy. You were right to say
It
that.
is heresy, like I said. All right. And you haven't the right reaction. And in fact, it's a
Yeah,
reaction I
there's a time and
expect.
place
And
for everything for the listeners.
yeah,
So let's just
yeah.
have an open vibe. Let's just have an open.
Yeah. Yeah, no. So there's a lot to this, all right?
Yeah.
I'll say this. this particular concept, I haven't had enough reaction like from the public just yet. Like there's a reaction I'm expecting, and I haven't had it yet. And
Yeah,
that's only because that I haven't also
there's
publicized this
yeah,
concept
there's still
very
things.
well. And that's why I'm yet to really do some more work, write some research paper on it, release it. So whenever I talk about actualized ledger thesis, people are like, "Oh, what's that?" I'm like, "Okay, you know what? Do you know the meme with the owl? Like there's
Well,
a
how many
incomplete owl.
links?
It's like a complete owl. It's like draw the owl. No, like finish the owl.
Finish the owl. Is it?
Yeah, I'll send you an image for that.
Well,
Maybe you can toss
yeah,
it.
people should follow you because Emmanuel has a lot of memes. So like there is, if you want to, I should actually just kind of do some research on your timeline too, because I do know that you are in touch with meme culture in a way that's pretty nuts, dude. I always laugh. Even today, I have something that I'll show people later towards the end of this. But okay, so there's a meme with an
Yeah.
owl. It's not the one with the Tootsie Pop.
No, no, no. It's just an owl. It's a hand drawn owl that pretty much the whole context is like an idea is an idea, but you need to like flesh it out.
Yeah,
Okay, so you need to draw up the owl, and that's why I usually use. That's how I respond to it. I tell people I can give you the high level, but I still need to do a lot of research to back it and to really solidify it if I'm to pitch it to the world. Now the reason why I tell you I know there's such a reaction I'm expecting to get, which I haven't gotten simply because I haven't publicized this enough, is because back in 2022, yeah, 2022 or 2021, one of those years. Time is moving too fast. The team at Stanford. So Dan Bonner, he's a researcher, a cryptographer. He leads the blockchain lab down in Stanford. He and his team came out with this research called reversible tokens, ERC-721R, ERC-20R, and these were tokens that pretty much had a governance component to them that allowed people to recover, stolen tokens or recover tokens that were sent to the wrong address, or just recover tokens that were, locked away in an inaccessible account. All right, due to lost keys and everything. They did write up a whole research on this. The researchers they it's not perfect. That's why I will say because there were some aspects where I was like, okay, you guys should have covered this, but essentially they narrowed things down to just like tokens, assets. All right. And that's when I realized that okay, the something that people and this is what as you realize these things, you realize that we don't quite map out our mental models very well, in general, because there's always something missing, and that creates a lot of not in the derogatory, but then a lot of nonsense. It creates a lot of vacuums and plot holes that you're like, this doesn't make sense. So essentially, what I'm trying to get to is like they wrote up a paper that covers what I call micro ledgers. Every asset that exists on any chain is its own runs on its own micro ledger. This micro ledger is implemented in its own on-chain script, or in the case of Cardano, its own policy. All right, so that's where its monetary policy lives. That's where pretty much all the things that it needs to know. Okay, this is how many tokens you have. This is how many tokens I have. This is what you can do with the token. Yada yada yada. That's all in its own ledger. So you have the micro ledger, which I define for just about any asset, NFTs, DeFi tokens, yada yada yada. You have the base ledger, which is the fundamental ledger on which a micro ledger exists on. So, for example, the Cardano base ledger, its core currency or its core unit is ADA. All right. And it's able to support multi-assets. All
and
right.
like with Cardano, you have tokens that are not ADA that are treated like ADA, which is
Exactly.
like the native. But on let's take a NFT on Ethereum, right? Because isn't
Yeah.
there kind of isn't there
Not
is there a micro ledger for that, or is it sort of?
There is. So the micro ledgers for that would be
That's
your on-chain scripts, your 721
that's what
scripts,
I
your
thought. Okay, so,
20 scripts. Yeah. Because on the Ethereum-based ledger, the only recognized and recognizable unit on that Ethereum ledger is Ether. After that, nothing else exists. You delete the EVM, everything is just gibberish after that. All your JPEGs and your tokens and your $1 million stuff, it's all gibberish at that point.
but the NFTs on Ethereum are not these whatever, I think you called them retractable tokens, or the paper from Stanford was talking about
Well,
tokens that you could like take back if they were stolen. So
right,
not to conflate, but there is
right.
still with NFTs on Ethereum, they're not
Mhm.
native tokens. They're not treated like Ethereum. There is
Right.
kind of this other micro ledger sort of magic going on. But
Right.
on Cardano, you do have, I guess, native tokens, which I think is actually an interesting concept, by the way, for what you can do with that. But there's a time and place for everything, probably. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
concept.
fundamentally, so there's a concept of what the token is, and there's the implementation. All right. In the case of an ERC20 token, the concept is a token that can do ABCD. The implementation is this on-chain script that has these provisions, and it turns out that the on-chain script provisions, you know, natively are very expressive or are allowed to be expressive, whereas on Cardano, not so. All right.
Right.
They're not natively made to be super expressive. If you want to be extra expressive, you make what I call Plutus tokens. Okay. And that's where you can do a lot of interesting things from there. If you
Yeah.
look at the one from Alessandro, shout out to Alessandro.
Yep.
Those have been, some of the early steps into showing the difference between the native token and the Plutus token. But even then, that's mostly implementation detail. There's still the concept of the tokens themselves and the ledgers which govern them. All right. So the monetary policy of an AXO token or AXO or the AXO monetary policy doesn't have anything to do with the monetary policy of ADA or the monetary policy of, I don't know, give me another token, the Optim token, that Zygomatic project,
They're all
right? Yeah.
separate. They're
But
all
yeah,
separate. They're treated
right. But
like ADA.
yeah. Wait, say that again?
I said each of those tokens is treated like ADA on Cardano, but the monetary policy is different in terms of like, and by treated like ADA, I know that maybe that's the wrong wording because ADA has a lot of use cases that these other tokens don't on Cardano. However, it
Right.
moves the same in terms of how you can move a token on Cardano. Uh,
Yeah, the ledger design for assets on the Cardano ledger is very interesting, and we need a whole other session to talk more about it because yeah, and I can already tell like we've digressed quite a lot. Coming back to reactions in general.
yeah,
So yeah, there was the Stanford paper that came out back then, and everyone lost their minds. Okay, they were like, "How dare you try to build tokens that are reversible, that are recoverable? What's wrong with you? No one's ever going to do this." They give them hell for a full week. All right. I think that paper was my aha moment, but I didn't realize it was my aha moment then. It
yeah,
took a few months to years for me to remember that someone tried doing this. Go
yeah.
back and see what they did. And I realized that, okay, for the scope which they were working at, it was pretty much still like narrowed down. I'm looking to really make this much more broad and general, right? To open the possibilities for just about any other asset. So this is not just something for ADA or Ether or BTC, but then for any other. So this, and that's where you get to context of ledgers. So you have your base ledger, your micro ledger, you even have your mini ledgers, which I always say they exist at the bridge between one ledger and another ledger. A mini ledger is a representation of an external ledger on a given ledger. But more on that at another time as well. But
I love that.
these
So
are the
like,
provisions.
can I just spend a couple of seconds on that because
Yeah.
I never heard somebody say that. So there's literally a mini ledger in
Uh-huh.
like where the bridge is, the
Yeah.
connecting two different. Yeah, so that's really interesting, man. Like
Yeah.
that.
That's how, and that's all dependent on the mode of the
I
interaction.
like
So, for
that way
example,
of looking at it though, because it makes sense. It's like you have micro ledgers, you have base ledgers, and then you have mini ledgers.
right. All
Interesting.
right. And mini ledgers are more they're more, how do I put it? They're more real in the roll-up context. Okay. Because the key thing about roll-ups is that a given base ledger can kind of verify the world of another ledger. All right. So let's pick base and Ethereum. All right. The roll-up mode, base is a blockchain fundamentally, but its roll-up mode allows Ethereum to cross-check its ledger activity to know if everything was done properly. All right. So Ethereum relies on, so that state you post to the Ethereum ledger and all the data you post, that's the song and dance you do to manage that mini ledger. But once you're out of Ethereum, once you're on Base, Base has its own ledger. It has its own Base ledger. Okay. And this applies for just about any chain that bridges to the other. It all comes down to, how much jurisdiction do you want to have? How much oversight do you want to have? Okay, that will determine if you want to actually, implement these things. So yeah, but these are the frameworks and models you end up deriving as you're doing research and you're finding missing pieces. You're like, something should be there, but it's not there. And you're running through different research papers and you're like, why is no one making a provision for this? Or why is no one like identifying this? Have you played Ages of Empire? Or Age of Empires, yeah.
I've seen that around. I've played like
It's a great game. I'll highly recommend. Okay. Yeah, I'll have you play Civilizations.
What would you say?
Civilization.
Warcraft Reforged is
okay. I mean, I played Warcraft as well, but I'll go back to in the game. There's a mode where when you're playing, there's your main player, your main character, and everything around you is pretty much like a pitch dark. You do not know the world around you. Okay. As you progress into that world, that pitch, black area just lightens up. All right. And you actually see, oh, wait, there's more grass over here. There's like an ocean over here. Okay. So as you progress, your world expands. And that's what I'm trying to say, that as you do a certain kind of research and dive.
That's how I feel in blockchain.
Exactly.
That's how I
feel. So you end up coming with so many interesting concepts and models that have not been documented anywhere specifically. There might be some pointers here and there. But I realize that you're making new research as you're going. And it's all about the peer review process. Once you've made that research, come out to the public and put out this like, I think this is how things work. And it's up to someone else to tell you why it does work or why it does not work. Okay? Because if they tell me it doesn't work, it means that they did some level of research akin to what I did. Exactly. And they found what I didn't find.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the benefit of also that open peer review experience in like your own, research, endeavors. And so time and time again, as you're diving into, and this is why I say that we focus a lot of time on building consensus systems. We focus a lot of time on building the right runtime systems, but not so much on ledger design, not so much. All right. And that's why I feel like, okay, that's a bit underdone. Even the networking stack. Okay. I feel like that's underdone. Okay, that's underrated. But this all falls within the ledger layer. I've actually written a blog post. I don't write a lot, but people told me to start writing. I've started a new blog, set of blogs, which I have a lot of drafts to. I digress. But yeah, essentially, you're the.
No, it's good. It's good to. I just think the way that you explain certain things is a bit. Everybody's got their way of kind of explaining things, but I like the way that you explain things in terms of. Some of these concepts, like I've never even heard somebody say micro ledger or mini ledger. Maybe I have, but
you probably have if you've tracked Hydra for a bit.
Yeah, just kind of helps put it into context a little bit. When we talk about ledgers, though, that's interesting.
Yeah,
I want to let you keep going, and I have.
Yeah, I'm gonna put a pin on it because I tend to yap on quite a bit. But so essentially, when it comes to reactions, I know what that reaction is gonna look like. But then also, I have this thing. I actually put this on Farcast, where I said the Actualized Ledger thesis will be the seatbelt moment for crypto.
Yeah, that makes sense, dude. It's
all right.
Like a little bit of safety, but you're still driving, and you're still
right.
in the car, and it.
But you remember when they first. Yeah, I remember when they first introduced seatbelts, right? Into cars.
I was, too young. I'm like 20.
It was before my time as well. Trust me, it was way before my time. But there's like history.
I remember. I remember that in the past.
Right? Remember that, bro?
Like I remember that. Yeah.
Those were the days, right?
I'll tell you. Yeah, we were
exactly.
We didn't even have a seatbelts, dude. That was
exactly right.
We were animals.
Like now they got seatbelts and they got like air conditioners in their cars. Like what the hell? Like. All right. But so back in the day, like initially they built cars without seatbelts, and the mortality rate was just through the roof. In some cases, literally. And suddenly, some folks, a few organizations came and said, okay, we should start implementing seatbelts. And people just hated it. Like, there's no way I'm putting on a seatbelt. Why do I need to put on a seatbelt in my own car? Yada, 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 yada. They hated it. They gave it all the negative reaction you can imagine. All right. What do we see today?
I mean,
Everybody is wearing a seatbelt. Every car has a seatbelt. How dare you build a car? Even airplanes have seatbelts. All right. All right. So I expect that same reaction for the actualized ledger thesis. I expect a lot of hate. I don't expect it to for me to put out a research paper on that and have it adopted right away. No, no, no. I expect it to be a multi-year, probably longer than even
decade.
the acceptance of like of a runtime on the blockchain. Because when Vitalik proposed the EVM, people hated it. People gave him hell for it. Like the Bitcoin community, many other communities out there, they all gave him hell for it. They were like, "You don't build blockchains that way. You're bringing in too much risk. People are going to lose money."
Go
Yada yada
back
yada.
to go back to Bitcoin Magazine, Vitalik. Like,
There
yeah,
you go, right? So now what do you see? If you're building a blockchain today, you have to have a runtime environment. Okay, you need to have some kind of virtual machine or equivalent abstract machine to do the things you need to do to add in, advanced, computation abilities to, your ecosystem. We've seen, and this took like how many years to normalize? A few years,
it was,
right? So
bro. Like, honestly,
yeah, yeah.
how fast blockchain is moving. I always like to point out. I mean, this is not like I, gosh, dude, like
Yeah.
with having enough people in the industry to even start the timer, it hasn't been long. Like it's not
Yeah.
like a 40-year, wait.
Right, no, exactly, and which is why my the fear which I've accepted or the concern which I've accepted is that it will take longer for the actualized ledger thesis to be reasoned about and kind of accepted by a good chunk of the industry. It'll take longer than it took the EVM to be a normal thing or VMs to be a normal thing in blockchains. And that's something I'm fine with as long as that work is out there. But here's a funny thing. A lot of projects out there already, like your Optimisms, your Polkadots, your Tezos, your Algorand, any blockchain that is governance focused, they're already kind of laying the foundations for something like that. Okay, they just need a certain level of steering and a certain level of audacity to try to evolve, at that rate and at that direction. This might be something ahead of its time, and it wouldn't be the first time where I've written something, I've put out an idea, and I find out that I was a bit too early. And I'm seeing it happen. I'm like, yeah, I kind of expected this to happen like ages ago. So it's the weight you carry when you're thinking a lot and you're thinking ahead quite often.
No, no,
Um,
I respect it. I think it's interesting because when it comes to counterparty risk, though, it's just got to be. I think the thing that's scary about the what you're talking about, the actualized ledger thesis, is the same thing that's scary for the. I mean, some of the reasons why we even have blockchain and crypto. It's like, do we want to trust anybody that's a human?
mhm,
And
right.
okay, if there's a proof of governance,
Right.
well, what happens with the guy that, did steal the account, but all the checks that were running
He managed to slip through.
managed to slip through and all those little checks and balances, like
Right.
there's probably like so many checks and balances for
Yeah,
it to be, I think, rock solid. But
exactly.
I respect how you said that you had to put a few more layers of paint on it. Uh,
Yeah. It needs more research, but even then, even for the case of like things going wrong, the key thing is that all the work that will be done in any given governance framework on a given blockchain based crypto ecosystem, it fundamentally has to be built in a way that has certain properties. So when we build blockchains, what are the desired properties we kind of must have, right? It has to be censorship resistant. It has to be
Immutable, maybe,
both.
like
Come again?
immutable. I was gonna say,
I'll circle back on that word. Yeah, I'll definitely circle back on that word.
I said a maybe on that because it is
Yeah.
because Ethereum's roadmap, and then you also have some interesting things where, okay, maybe if state is correct, we don't, but this is now we're okay. So let me just finish this thought, which is if state is
Sure.
correct, we need to actually look back at the transaction, see all the data, or can we just be like state's correct? And there's a lot of conversations right now around like, hey, maybe we don't need to, see every little thing that is keep the record, I guess, on the ledger.
Right.
And I think Ethereum's new like roadmap is to go that direction for scalability reasons, if I'm not mistaken. But you might know better than me. Uh,
Yeah, I know just a bit. This is a lot of the work that goes into Ethereum's focus on statelessness. It's not really full statelessness. It's some kind of partial statelessness. But so they're working on this concept called vertical trees, and essentially, it's being able to work in a verifiable manner without too much, without too much baggage. So
yeah,
today, in most blockchains, in order to derive a certain part of the state or the entire state, you kind of need everything. You need a whole story. Like, for example, imagine if to know who I am, I literally have to tell you everything about my life from the very first time I could think of myself. Okay, till the present day where we met. Just so you know what kind of person.
it'd be a long interview. It would be a long,
Exactly.
yeah.
Right. So the question is, how can we introduce, certain core primitives and mechanisms that allow us to verify certain truths without having to work through that baggage.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is the vision for almost every blockchain, and this where cryptography becomes a very big deal. This is where all of zero knowledge related work, becomes very important. It's how can you have the right primitives, the right, bits and pieces to help you derive truth without the majority of the information. You can
gracefully, like,
gracefully as well. Exactly, because if it's costing you an arm and leg, then that's also not helpful at all. Yeah, so Ethereum is definitely doing that. Many blockchains are at some point going to do that. I say that even Solana is one of those blockchains where I say they've just sped run the life cycle of a blockchain. I feel like Solana is in terms of a lot of its baggage, a lot of its complications, it's where a lot of blockchains will be in the next 20 to 50 years. All right. In terms of like state growth, regulating state growth on these things, they're growing at a ridiculous rate. Okay. The time it takes for, I don't know, pretty much like the time it takes for Ethereum and Cardano and Bitcoin and the other chains to kind of become a problem in terms of like how long they've been running for. Solana does that in days.
yeah.
So as much as we give them hell for like a lot of everything they do, they're very bold. They're very daring. They're actually solving tomorrow's problems today. Okay, and we may not recognize it because apparently people just can't get rid of their bag biases or whatever, animosity they may have for VCs, yada yada yada.
Well, it wouldn't be, the brand that it is without a few properties that I think
Right.
were incredibly attractive.
Yeah.
It's really
Yeah.
tough to break through the noise. And even when Solana as a chain, I guess I'm trying to think back when I first heard of Solana, it was still like there was a lot of noise, man. There was things that were coming out left and right, and there was all these, L2s on Ethereum, and they were starting to become I remember Matic and Polygon, like when Matic turned to Polygon essentially, and uh,
Right.
for that. But there was still a lot of noise to break through. Now it seems like there's more noise than ever. So when I see some like developers, software engineers, really say, hey, this is kind of interesting on a next generation chain. It's
Mhm.
kind of how I got into researching Radix, and I'm still
Mhm.
covering just everything I can. Like you said, walking through the dark shadows. It's like you're revealing,
Exactly.
right? But Radix has been interesting to me for a few reasons regarding consensus and what they're doing there with the sharding breakthrough of like being able to transfer value cross shard and have this infinite, like almost seemingly infinite shard space. So when I
Yeah.
like that, it's hard to break through the noise though, and even for Radix where it is today, it's going to be hard for them, I think, to break through the noise. Like not many
Yeah.
people really have heard about it or realize it. But Solana must have had some key properties to allow them to become that brand. Is what I always, you got to admit, right? It's got to be.
Yeah, no, I have this post in my drafts. I haven't shipped it yet, but it kind of goes like, yeah, sure, you've got cool tech, you make great advancements, but what good is it to like, the everyday users? So there's essentially what I'm trying to say is that it's great that we're building a lot of great underlying tech as we should, but judging from the past few cycles, you need to give people a reason to be in your ecosystem. Okay, and that's what a lot of blockchain projects tend to not really realize and focus on. Like you've built, great tech and everything, and your app layer is just not really. And even if there is something there, it's painful to kind of navigate and use. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that more
You have to go
projects,
into Discord to figure out like how to use it properly or like what the
right,
heck's going on that app. It's
right,
like a really un-user centric world still in a lot of
mhm.
cases. It feels like, at least for me. I haven't used too many dApps on Solana, so I don't really like. I can't really comment there. I like. What do you think? Do you have
Uh,
any? Are you impressed with what you're seeing, or is there some things that do you think it still has
if
ways to go, like the rest of the like blockchain world, or where are you kind of at with their app network or their dApp network?
Right. From a user perspective, when you've used things like, Polygon already or Gnosis or Avalanche, like when you've used, very good,
There, it's like
yeah, it's as a user, you're definitely getting a better service than if you're using Ethereum, or Bitcoin, that kind of thing. So I think as an end user, just having that low cost, having that low latency is definitely a win. But once you have all of that, what do I get to do with it? I think that's the interesting thing right there. So um, I don't do much of Solana. I really don't do much as a user. I don't do much. I just use Jupiter or Exchange or Art and call it a day. I think I've probably done more on Base than I've done on Solana.
what is
All right.
base? Because I don't think I heard of base before I saw you tweet a few things, Emmanuel. Like one of the comparisons with Uber and
Right.
having different companies that are these household brands and names,
Right.
choosing base over other things. And that caught my eye. Can you kind of explain to people that maybe haven't dug into it what base sort of is? I think you made a comparison to Onyx, I believe
Yeah.
it's called,
Yeah.
which was that JP Morgan's
Yeah.
chain.
That's the chain. Yeah.
Yeah, so like what is base and where does it kind of live in this whole world of blockchains and ledgers?
Right.
To your,
So
original comment, blockchain ledger. So we're separate.
yeah, we've definitely like made a few rounds here and then our entire talk, but this is good. This fluid. This is all natural and everything. So base at first and foremost, base is just another blockchain project. And I don't mean to downplay when I say it's just another blockchain. I don't mean to downplay them and the work they do, but it's just another blockchain project in our industry. And they have a few goals, set out. They want to pretty much build a system that extends the possibilities for the Ethereum ecosystem.
So it's
Right. So
Ethereum, it's what, like Tendermint, or is it like Ethereum?
so base. Well, they use the OP stack, which is built a lot based on the Geeth node implementation.
Oh,
So not Tendermint. Well, and that's a good. I think the question you're asking is like, what consensus are they using?
well, sorry, my bad, because it's not an L1, it's a L2.
It's not an L1. Yeah, it's not an L1, but even using the word it's not an L1 is just for practicality. But let me go over it. So it's a blockchain, and their whole thing is to kind of extend the Ethereum ecosystem, kind of enable more possibilities for the Ethereum ecosystem. All right. And they do this by attributing themselves to the Ethereum protocol as a roll-up. So pretty much Base is a blockchain
Or
as a roll-up.
okay.
Yeah, so Base is a blockchain that exhibits a roll-up mode with the Ethereum protocol. All right.
So
So
it
if
has,
this is Ethereum,
oh, so it does have its own, it has its own ledger, but it puts
yeah,
things to Ethereum. Oh, okay. Got it.
exactly. So it has its own ledger. This is Ethereum. This is the Base ledger, and they happen to have a bridge, and not just any bridge, validating bridge, which or a supposedly validating bridge, which allows them to exhibit a roll-up mode. And what does this mean when you say roll-up mode? Essentially, every bit and piece of history that goes down in this world, in this ecosystem, is pretty much dumped onto the Ethereum ledger, onto the Ethereum blockchain. All
Yeah.
right. And the reason why they've done this is so that Ethereum, the Ethereum protocol, can openly check and verify everything that happens in there. Okay, so all the transaction data, everything gets dropped onto Ethereum, usually in a compressed format, all right? And Ethereum protocol operators are able to take that data, which has been dumped over, and pretty much rerun the entire lifetime of the chain, of the base chain, to know, okay, this is how many balances you actually have. This is all the things that you are. Okay, like just based off all your data, I can know who you are without having to be in you.
Yeah.
Okay? Just because I've told you, just from me being able to tell you my entire life story, word for word, bar for bar, you now know me as much as I know me without ever having to be me.
Oh, okay. So
Okay.
extending the Ethereum ecosystem now makes a little more sense too when you
Exactly. All
understand
right.
the
The marketing narratives you get seen thrown around when you hear rollups is like rollups scale Ethereum. They make it. I'm like, no, not a single rollup has made Ethereum go faster or cheaper.
dude.
Okay.
I mean, this is like even with layers. I don't even think that layers necessarily are scaling things. I think they're kind of siloing different, creating new silos, maybe
Right. And
experience of user experience slash communities
right.
that are
Yeah,
connected.
no, so even the concept of layers, that's why I hear people I expect to know better say things like, oh, layer twos versus side chains. And I'm like, it's like you're saying taxi drivers versus Uber drivers. Or, I'm like, these are just so and I've written a post about this by saying when you hear the word layer, it's essentially it's a label for a role, a job description. Okay. At the end of the day, these are two different blockchains, two discrete blockchains. One, based on the relationship, can serve as a base chain, and the other you can call like an auxiliary chain, all right? Or I call discrete chains, right? And when you assign something to a layer, it means that there's a task, that you're kind of specializing it for. All right. So when you look at the is it the OSI model? You have all the data in networking. We have like an OSI model which pretty much shows like all the different levels for different pieces of tech and infrastructure. So you have the data layer, you have where the cables and everything
But
through.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna
I don't have that at my fingertips.
OSI. Okay.
Yeah, OSI model. But essentially, when you set layers, is because you're assigning tasks. Okay, because each of these layers are still their own thing. Okay, they're not born or made to be they're not made or born for this job or this role. They do something, and it just so happens that that thing they do can be used to do a certain job. All right. So when you assign a layer to something, you're essentially assigning a job to it. All right. But at the end of the day, it's still a blockchain. When you say base is a layer two, it's a layer two to Ethereum. But to every other chain, it's just another blockchain. You build a bridge from base to Avalanche, a bridge from base to, Algorand or Solana,
Yeah.
they're not layer twos to base because not
Correct. Yeah.
right. All right, because it's a
It's a relationship with every other
exactly
chain, but to Ethereum,
exactly
the base chain. Yeah. No, I
all
like
right,
that. And yeah, this is
and
yeah.
this is something that drives me nuts about marketing teams across the various roll-up projects. It drives me nuts every day, and I'm like a broken record on Twitter at this point. But these are the things you need to kind of grasp to also derive the right mental models and know how to approach certain things the right way. So when things hit the fan in some way, you are not surprised. You know that, okay, it's capable of this, it's capable of that. This could have happened already. All right. I say this one thing when I say, people say, oh, rollups inherit Ethereum security. All right. I'm like, no, there's if Ethereum will not fork for you, there's no level of security you're inheriting. All right.
That's
If
good.
anything, the best thing you're getting is a certain level, a certain path for fallback or recourse. And what does this mean? And this particularly goes for the Ether asset itself. Okay, so because you establish that validating bridge, and this validating bridge doesn't have to trust the state you tell it, but rather it seeks all the information you dumped on the Ethereum blockchain. It's able to self check, self verify that you are what you say you are, and my citizens, my Ethereum citizens, have this amount of value in your country, in your ecosystem. All right. And if shit hits the fan, forgive my French, we have all the data we need to help them exit, to help them evacuate. All
Yeah,
right.
you reported enough of what the country over there was like, and you can clone it almost, or you can kind of just take it and now put it somewhere else.
Exactly. Right. For the purpose of like, evacing your citizens, that kind of thing. I'll give you an example. When if you see all of these like war movies or like, I don't know, Hotel Rwanda or something like that, you always notice that the embassies are usually the folks who are able to escape a country.
Okay.
Like if something goes wrong in a third world country or something, usually the U.S. embassy is like you'd wish you were an American, because you just have to go to the embassy and then they have like a Black Hawk ready for you and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
That's the kind of provision that roll-up set up in their validating bridge. So you have your state transition checkers, so your state verifiers. That's your succinct proofs, all right, or your recomputation proofs or your interactive proofs, whatever you're working with, all right. And they say false proofs or fraud proofs, but then I've written that's another word that gets abused. Like even the whole thing around optimistic rollups, like the word optimistic itself is like there's just so much poor nomenclature in our industry and just how we normalize that. It drives me nuts. But anyway,
Dude, that's why I do podcasts. I want to be part of the solution, not the problem. Because even things that are basic, man, like
right?
people that have like learned and talked to me about like, oh man, when you explain that proof of stake isn't a type of it's not like a consensus mechanism, that really helped because
Yeah,
like I thought proof of stake was a consensus mechanism, opposed to a type of like a type of framework for
yeah,
that gets
yeah.
umbrella under different consensus mechanisms for different proof of stake blockchains, but proof of stake itself and things like that even are so basic. But I don't even know if you can learn that really quick. Like you got to be a blockchain
No,
maybe a couple of years to even know,
yeah.
like
It,
even like
it,
figure
it
that
takes
out.
everyone a while. It takes everyone a while to really get their bearings, to get their bearings properly.
Yeah.
And not everyone gets that opportunity or gets positioned in a place where they realize they have to do more of that digging. So sometimes I don't, I don't give too many people too much hell because I'm like, if you don't go looking, you usually wouldn't find it. Um, but yeah, these are like, but you look all around your literature or mainstream literature, mainstream media, and they just keep throwing out all these words, like I have this GIF or this meme which I say is like that word you keep using. It doesn't mean what you think it means. But that's all you see in crypto media. They throw all kinds of words to say certain things, and you're like, it doesn't really work that way, or it doesn't really do that. But yeah, anyway, I'm digressing a bit. But so like yeah, at the end of the day, you have Base, its own chain, and you have Ethereum, and the relationship they have is that Base place, is a member or is a part of Ethereum's roll-up centric roadmap or agenda, or as I like to like facetiously call it, the Ethereum empire. Right. So, and this is this also touches on another area of study which I call multi-chain policies. All right. Now a blockchain ecosystem can have certain multi-chain policies. It can have an autarkic policy or autarky. And that's like a policy where it's very self-reliant, very self-dependent. It doesn't think that it needs such an ecosystem doesn't really try to rely on too much how do I call it? Too much value departure. Let me call it that. Value removal. Like they don't believe in having people move value out of their system. They believe in bringing in more value from other systems into their system. Most importantly, they focus on just having everything you need to function. Everything you need to function. All right. So an example of this is Bitcoin. Okay. Like Bitcoin, like sure, there's lightning and everything, but at the end, Bitcoin feels like we have everything we need. Okay, we don't need to do any roll-ups or that kind of thing. But maybe even Bitcoin, it's a fuzzy example. I'll say a perfect example is Solana. Solana, Aptos, Sui, those are projects which I'll say exhibit an autarkic multi-chain policy, where they feel like, no, we don't need roll-ups. We don't need auxiliary systems to supercharge our base ledger, our ecosystem. We have everything we need. low fees, fast transactions, yada yada yada. Yeah, we'll have some bridges here and there, but these bridges are more to extract value from the other side, not to send value out of our system to the other system. All right.
Right.
So that's a toxic, system right there. You have like what I call uh a ledger expansionist policy or ledger expansionism policy. And mind you, these are things which like I like you wouldn't go on and type unless it's something I've written, you wouldn't find them anymore because these are things which you derive as you're making sense of the models you're
Bro,
discovering and you're
dude,
researching.
yeah, when there's a great example. People that watch my channel consistently will know that even when Alessandro created Nebula, I
Mm-hmm.
started coming up with all of these ideas of a more, I think, atomically composable NFT marketplace dynamic where you have shared access to listings on the ledger, and
Yeah.
it's kind of something that's so arcane or hard to describe. But when you go into the weeds and when you understand it and you talk to Alice and you check, hey, could this actually work where you could have me setting up my own marketplace as a YouTuber and have
Right.
the same access to every other listing and every single project marketplace that basically has a NFT sort of like collection on their marketplace. I can source that same listing. We boost discoverability for the entire ecosystem because now you
Right.
have way more discoverability. You're tacking on service fees. And
Mm-hmm.
these are net positives, but when you talk to people about these things, it can sometimes not be the mainstream garble, or that's the wrong word, but there's
Well,
there's certain things that are like, unless you kind of look into them for like a
yeah.
really long time, I don't like blame people for looking at me like I'm crazy when I'm like talking about certain things,
Right. That's the risk you take on, especially if you're doing a lot of deep level research, a lot of like esoteric research in the industry or in any industry. You come out looking like a madman. You come out looking like a guy who's like Eureka, Eureka, with like no clothes on and everything. That's what you'd look like. As you're discovering new things, and you're like, no one's made provisions, no one's written up on this stuff. No one's. I'm like, why? Like IBM, Hyperledger, all you folks, like, what have you been doing? Like, why has no one like
right?
better flesh out these things? So you find you
Where
come
are
to
they? Where
yeah,
are they?
right. Um,
Why aren't
yeah,
they in
no,
the trenches? Why aren't they in the trenches, dude? There's
exactly. Okay. So well, the industry is also huge, and there's so many problems to solve. So I'll cut them some slack, but
oh,
still.
it's infinite. It's infinite, bro. It's infinite.
Exactly. Infinite games. But like, yeah, so the second policy I would say is the ledger expansionism policy, or ledger expansionist policy. And this is a policy. Um, Now this word people take a funny way. That's why they say ledger imperialism, but it's akin to imperialism, whereby you are pretty much expanding your ecosystem. Um, oh, that's a word for this. But pretty much you're expanding your ecosystem by creating new spaces. All
Hmm.
right, by building new spaces and taking control of those new spaces in some capacity, all right, or having some dominance over those new spaces in some capacity. For example, there's a word for when the ocean probably like shifts for a bit, or there's like a volcanic eruption, and next thing you know, there's like a new island like coming out of the ocean, area. There's a word for that. I can't remember that right now, but it's a word which I use to support this particular definition. But essentially, you build new blockchains, you build new ledgers to move work to. Okay,
Yes.
all right, or you kind of annex, lack of a better term, you annex existing ledgers, or you bring in existing ledgers under your ledger rule, or under your ledger dominance, under your ecosystem rule. All right. And this is something you see in Ethereum. That's why I jokingly say the Ethereum empire, where you have blockchains that didn't exist before, but you have Optimism, you have Base, you have Arbitrum, you have
Yeah.
Zk Sync, you have Scroll. So many of them, they came out of nowhere. They were made for that. They were these extra lands made so we could move people there. We could offload people there, and we could multiply, expand, make the Ethereum ecosystem robust. So you find people like Josh Stock say the capacity of Ethereum is a combination of its layer ones and its layer twos. Okay, and I'm like, Mechanically, that's not true. But then, economically, sure, that is the case. Philosophically, that is the case. But mechanically, these are all discrete systems. So yeah, that's your ledger expansionist policy. So this is a blockchain that feels like, yeah, we can do everything on our own. But what we're going to do is create a pathway to build new blockchains that all feed into us in some capacity. So you look at some characteristics such as they have to use the same token. So for example, in every Ethereum-based rollup, you're using Ether as your base token.
Right.
That's like a core characteristic. If you go to Hawaii or you go to Puerto Rico, you're using the dollar.
Yeah.
Right? That kind of thing. Another characteristic is, in a sense, a certain tax or a certain tribute or a certain what did they do in ancient times?
Like a tariff?
Come again?
Like tariffs? Well, I
Like
guess.
tariffs, yeah, something like that. There's supposed to be a certain value capture from these external systems, from these new supporting systems, back into the mother chain or the motherland.
Ah,
All
man,
right.
it feels so
So
like when you're saying
right.
it like this, it's so true, but it feels kind of wrong. Like it
It,
when
it, it is.
you
It
look
is.
at it,
But
not wrong, like incorrect, but just like wrong.
yeah.
Like it
Yeah.
feels very like I don't know, man. I feel like there's a lot of strategic warfare going on. Like
There is, and
feels
that's
unsafe.
that's that's the song and dance that has to happen for that ecosystem and for that multi-chain policy to also function. All
Yeah.
right, so that's why they're dumping data. That's why they're dumping data from their external system onto the Ethereum blockchain. That's why the how do you call it? The majority of value on those systems are bridged from Ethereum. Okay, the second you pull all that liquidity out, they're useless. There's nothing to them. Okay, the majority of every asset on those rollups are all bridged. Uniswap, it'd be a Uni token, USDC token, an Ether token, whatever. They're all bridged, and that is like that's ransom. Lack of better, it's like a bit of a ransom in its own way. It's a bit of a hostage situation. It's like, what are you gonna do? Tell us to move our liquidity out of your system? Yeah, we'll do that happily. You would just be you'd be a ghost chain at that point. All right. So this is it's a symbiotic relationship in some sense that they establish, and they have these stringent rules to stay within the game.
Because
You have to
like
settle.
is
You
that
have to settle on
yeah,
Ethereum.
yeah. But is that because
Okay.
they're kind of taking some things like in Ethereum? It's interesting because you have a lot of like people now that are spinning up their L2s and like there's a lot of tech. In a way, it actually seems sort of fair from the standpoint of like, okay, you made that deal with the devil, you're gonna just spin up your thing, and you're
Exactly.
but there's always a catch,
Mhm.
And Emmanuel, I'm just gonna pause this for just 1 second here, just to ask you a quick on like how much time is
Yeah, I was gonna say,
okay. Cool.
perfect. Yeah, we're back.
You're back in
um,
action. We have new acquired drinks. Cheers.
oh, cheers.
Yeah, man, it's nice to do that sometimes. I think it's a little behind the scenes thing and podcasts that are longer because I do a lot of spaces too, and I don't know if you do a lot of spaces, Emmanuel, but I think you've done a good amount. Being
Yeah, I've done a few in the past. Yeah, quite a few.
when you get your endurance up, your like speaking endurance, because like some people can't, spaces. I think anybody that does spaces, that's the secret, man. But when you can do
Yeah,
3 hour Joe Rogan style podcast, you got to mix some
right.
breaks in there to keep fresh.
Yeah, yeah, it comes down to the personality you're engaging with, and just like the content of the conversation. We've had like such a really great conversation, and these things, time flies. Time flies when you're having fun. And yeah, this thank you for just like having me here. It's just been great.
Well, you were talking about a couple of things, man, and
Yeah,
I just want to make sure that we got it out. So you have
right.
imperialism,
Yeah, I call it ledger expansionism.
expansionism, and then you have
Exactly.
autocratic.
Alter key. Yeah, I'll type it into the chat. Just a moment. Where is the chat? There we go.
Autocracy? Did you say autocracy?
Uh, Alter key.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Yeah, it's a it.
oh, okay. Auto.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
These are one of those rare words you only find when when you're like trying to explain something. So yeah, so you have
Like arcane
autokey.
words
Yeah,
that you just have to like, I don't know.
yeah, they're not part of our everyday. I was like, oh shit, I guess that's a new word for me too. Yeah, so there is that. There's autokey and there's ledger expansionism. So autokey is what you'd see exhibited in Solana,
Let
or
me read
just
the,
any key.
let me read the definition for people. Autarky, economic independence or self-sufficiency.
Right.
Rural community autarky. Do you know what it is, man? I'm from Massachusetts, and the letter R is our nemesis.
Uh-huh.
And that's what's going to trip me up on this one. But autarky is a
Yeah.
utopian dream. So you got a bit of an example there. But a country, state, or society which is economically independent, or in Emmanuel's thesis, Solana, right?
Exactly. The fact that they feel they don't need to pretty much be out there, be doing too much in the multi-chain sense. That is their multi-chain policy, or it appears to be their multi-chain policy, and not just Solana, but then Sweet App. There's a lot of the chains that you see come out and they're like, we have everything we need, or even Radix. Radix will probably fit that bill. Where they're like, we have shards.
Yeah, big time.
You know,
Because
we
Radix is Radix is like uh, and this is in my research.
uh-huh.
I want to see it battle tested as my next milestone, right? I'm not like
All
a
right.
bag guy. I'm not like, hey, let's pump the bags, let's get the bags pumped.
Yeah.
I'm like, yo, I want to see something that really changes the game. And the
Yeah.
thing about Radix's pitch, and everybody should do their own research, is, and I find this true, they're like a full stack blockchain approach. They have a wallet that's top down, so like it's open source and it kind of can easily, you know, it easily integrates with all the dApps with new features and new things. It kind of waters it, like, it trickles down to the rest of
I
the
know the amenities that you should get from the door. That's a thing.
yes,
That I'm sure I get that sense from them as well. I love the work they've done in their runtime system with your whole scripting system. I think they've done a great job with the whole concept around UTX abstraction. Um, so power to them for that. Just reading through their docs, still, I'm like, oh wow, there's so many things I should not be thinking about, and they make sure I do not think about that. If I'm to try doing any dev work over there. So that's a good thing, and that's something that in many projects they've lacked, and has led to all kinds of interesting, issues and applications and what have you. So and that's that like I said, that's what really would determine where people will go and where people will stay, not just go but stay. You want to make sure that your churn is also very minimal.
and
So yeah.
with ecosystems like that, though, it's almost because the challenge that I hear community members in Radix say is the challenge right now is like, so they think they got their bases covered, they think they got the sauce, but getting that started as like
Yeah.
I feel like for ecosystems in this a talk frick man, the A word, it's
Yeah, it would.
it's definitely like, I think getting that thing kindled, and then do they have the sauce long term? So there's a couple,
Exactly.
if I was to play like, okay, what are we judging in terms of like a success for this,
Right.
the A word? Um
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting. So you have like the imperialism, which you called the sort of
Ledger expansionism. Yeah.
expansionism. Okay.
Yeah.
We have autocracy, or uh,
Yeah. And mind you, a lot of these concepts, they are
autark autarky autarky
yeah,
autarky
autarky, yeah, autarky,
autarky.
yeah,
Ledger expansionism.
exactly. So these concepts, this is where the philosophy, like, you pretty much could make a class called the philosophy of blockchains. Okay, but this is where like a lot of philosophy kicks in. This is where
I
you
love it.
realize that okay, blockchains is not just like all the dev work and technical stuff, but you need to make sense out of it in so many different ways. Because you realize that I actually wrote a post about this. I sent you a link to your Twitter or X, whatever they call it these days. But essentially, there's a lot of what we do that mirrors the world around us. There's almost nothing we're building in our industry that is entirely brand new as like setting concepts. Like we're trying to solve the same problems we've solved in other ways, in very archaic traditional ways. We're just trying to solve them in new ways. And so we're not doing anything amazingly new as a content philosophy. So you're able to find these parallels and you're able to draw them and you're able to say, okay, yeah, that's exactly what we're doing here. So yeah, you have Autarky, which Solana, Aptos, Sui, Radix, they exhibit, the most. Any chain that feels like they have everything they need. We have all the throughput, we have all the low fees, we have all the apps you need, we have everything. In fact, what we actually want is for you to move your liquidity from the other chains into our chain. That's how we win. Okay,
that is 100% it. Like that's the bet that they're making, especially with Radix. It's to be the unified kind of like global playground for monetary energy, and because they have atomic composability, some of the DApps that you can use. Some of the DApps that you can even use today. It's interesting because you see they have a UI in their wallet that basically shows how many components are being used, which basically means, okay, how many DApps are you kind of using together in the same transaction? So when you're using a few different DApps in the same transaction, you can see it. It reminds me of Cardano in some ways because you have like all the layout of, okay, this asset is going here, this like what's being withdrawn and deposited, what is it kind of puts it all into very human readable stuff. But to your point, that is the bet. It's that we're going to be the global unified. And I find that very interesting, and I'm very open-minded on this stuff. But it is interesting when you look at Ethereum's ecosystem and this kind of expansionism. And I would also, say that is super interesting. And then Cardano, sorry, I was going to ask.
So before we touch on Cardano and many others alike, or what I think Cardano is going to, but Ethereum, the word I was looking for is accretion. So in the real world, we have this concept called accretion, whereby the ocean would move funny, or you have some volcano eruptions, and you have new land formation from the ocean bed, or the ocean area, if you will. And so I don't know if you see the news, every now and then there's a new island that pops up around Japan, and then Japan and some other neighboring countries are like, finally like, no, this is my land. This is my land. Like, this land didn't exist like 2 years ago. It literally just came out of nowhere in the ocean. So accretion, and that's pretty much like the formation of a new ledger,
new territories, or
exactly. So instead of taking over like an existing system, like instead of like Ethereum trying to make Bitcoin an L2 and then trying to make Litecoin an L2, they're building their own chains and then giving those L2 designations to those chains. All right, but that's not the only way expansionism can happen. You can also have like what's the name? External systems, external ledgers also kind of commit to being a part of that particular policy under that particular agenda. An example of this is Cello, or I think they call it Cello, not Cello. Cello. So Cello, and I think Boba as well. But I'll focus on Cello. They were running their own
an O at the end.
Yeah, CELO. Yeah. They've been running their own base or primary blockchain, or aka L1 blockchain for many years now, and clearly they see some benefits to being on the Ethereum. So they say, guys, we should transition from being our own thing to being under Ethereum. All right. And so besides creating new blockchains to form this, this ledger expansion policy, you also have the possibility for people to come in and kind of swear fealty to that, to that mother chain, okay, or that father chain, whichever it is. But pretty much the Ethereum ledger, the Ethereum protocol itself. All right, so that's what you have with ledger expansionism. And the last
that's a good factoid. Okay, so that makes sense. Yeah, swear loyalty from outside to inside. You also have, this accretion concept.
Right. So just before we took the break, we'll talk about the various characteristics, such as, I don't know, you have to use Ether as your, as your transaction token, your base transaction asset. That's like the requirement for being on the Ethereum's, ledger expansions policy. All right. You have to dump your data on Ethereum. You have to do that. If you don't do that, you are not Ethereum aligned. All right. That kind of thing. You have to align with Ethereum socioculturally. All right. So all the things that Ethereum cares about, you have to care about that too. In fact, you have to exemplify, you have to contribute to it. Okay. Like you can't be carrying Cardano ideals or Cosmos ideals or Solana ideals, and then say you're
Oh,
Ethereum.
you can't get caught in an
No,
Ethereum alley repping Cardano, bro. Like
exactly, right?
gotta be a little bit more like, low key if you're low key repping Cardano in those parts.
Right.
I mean, with
So
philosophy of chain of like how you structure things for sure.
right. So those are some of the characteristics. Another characteristic is like the whole concept of like settlement and finality, or certain properties. The rule is you have to delegate or externalize those properties. So the reason why you see chains like Base and Optimism and Arbitrum and these guys don't implement like very full-fledged consensus mechanisms, like you ask an issue like, oh, are they using tenements? I'm like, no, they are not using tenements. In fact, they're not using any consensus. If anything, they're using a unique consensus system. Pretty much like it's one machine and one machine only. They are the judge, jury. Exactly.
It's
Yeah,
not
that's
like unique, like as in, oh, we haven't heard of it before. It's unique as in it's just one machine.
yeah, it's literally just one way. Like, who do you need to have consensus with other than yourself? There's no one. All right. So you can do that. But the reason why they can do that is because they have a greater system to check them.
With the roll up, essentially.
Exactly. That's the roll up mode, because they know that this system has this mother system, this father system has all your main data, all your main chain data, everything that they need to make sure that they're not, messing around.
Yeah.
All right. So knowing that you have like an authority or a certain high ranking entity to control your life, you don't see the need to be a bit more elaborate. All right. So yeah, you can run base runs on one machine. Most rollups just run on one machine. The sequencers and the executors, they all run on one machine, that kind of thing. You don't have nodes having to talk to each other on a P2P network to say, oh yeah, this transaction is valid and it's final. Like, no. It's one machine that says this transaction is valid and it's final. And you know what? Don't trust me, trust Ethereum, because that's where I go to for my true finality. And those are the characteristics you see in the Ledger expansionist system, right? And Ethereum is like, the first to like really show this out. Now you have the third policy, which I would say is probably my favorite, and it's such a greaseball name. I'm telling you, but I'm gonna type it for you and send it in the chat first.
Okay.
All right, it's such a greaseball name, but pretty much the word is supra-ledgerism. I know, right? Supra-ledger. So it's a twist on the word supranational. So in the real world, we have a concept of supranationalism, and that's a perfect example is the EU.
Okay.
Okay, that's a perfect example. Each country in the EU, they're their own sovereign state. All right, Norway, well, UK is no more there. Norway, Belgium, just the usual EU countries. There's 27 of them, I think. Yeah. All right. These are independent countries that have chosen to come under one collaborative arm, one cooperative arm, okay, to achieve certain commonalities and certain common goals. So, for example, when you have like an EU card or something, you can move between like, all the EU countries with no hustle. You don't need to pay for visas for like different. If I get a Schengen visa, I can move through any EU country or any within the Schengen area, that kind of thing. Or if they're an EU country, a cluster of EU countries, you just have the euro. Okay, you don't have to worry about the krona or whatever the currencies in the other countries. Like I think is it Norway? Are they the ones who use the krona, or is it? Yeah, I think Norway. Don't quote me on this. But essentially, there's the EU currency which you can use in most EU countries, and that's what you get to enjoy from that collaborative, umbrella, that cooperative system. But one country doesn't control the other. Okay, they're all their own countries. They can pass their own laws or something, but to interoperate, to cooperate efficiently, okay, and robustly, they make certain commitments, and they make certain trade-offs, or they meet certain requirements in order to be under that system. Okay, and that's what you have with supranationalism. That's the EU.
Is this
And what
Cardano? Is this Cardano?
and it's yet to be determined if that's where they would end up
Well,
at.
can I make an okay? Let me do a thought experiment with you then, because I would almost say that with Cardano and Cardano's partner chains, you kind of in the root of trust. Could you compare the root of trust to the EU, and then you could have things that are connected to that root of trust, or ADAs being used as the main currency on these different layers as that euro. I don't know. It's interesting. I'm just trying to think out loud, or what else would it kind of fall under? I don't know. I'm just
So, right. So that's it. That's why I said it's yet to be determined because Cardano's multi-chain ambitions have
so,
adjusted quite a bit over the years. Like the whole move to leveraging substrates and all these things. Like it has never been one fixed thing. It's there's been a vision, but that vision has been implemented or has been intended to be approached in so many different ways, which it would be immature or no premature to define. Yeah, because you look at the setup where they pretty much want all the validators to be SPOs from the Cardano main chain, and the question becomes, okay, isn't that a bit too coupling? Isn't that a bit too strict? All right, does that lean them closer to a ledger expansionism policy?
or you
Okay.
could have, because I heard of this one thing that was interesting, where you
Mm-hmm.
could have an ADA holder that would delegate to someone that wants to be an SPO on a different layer, uh,
Right.
that could just run. But it's still an SPO on Cardano then, because they have to run
Right.
SPO on Cardano and the other partner chain layer. It's just they don't have any ADA. They're just being delegated from another person that doesn't run the infrastructure. Right?
Right. So that's why I say that I'd rather let that framework go live and then I can assess it and say, okay, it leans more to this or it leans more to that. So I can't give you. I like to think that they're aspiring to, exhibit super ledgerism. I like to think that. All right. That's all I'll say for now. But
Well, it's
until they
kind
go
of like,
live with
yeah, they're kind of like closest, I guess, to that, but it's undeterminable. It's supposed to be versatile. I think like when I listen to, I think Army of Spies says this sometimes. I don't, sorry, Army of Spies, if I misquote you, but it's sort of like his explanations sometimes feel like, okay, Cardano can do a lot of things. You know,
Mhm.
it can do a lot of things, but the
Mhm.
ecosystems, I don't know, like where is everything going to gravitate towards, and how is the ecosystem going to form? It's going to be interesting for sure.
Right. I mean, if I'm to go with the old literature where they say, okay, let the Cardano main chain be this settlement layer, all right, and every other chain is just like a computation layer, then it leans more to a ledger expansionist policy, which is
Right.
closer to Ethereum, right?
And
Whereby
closer
these
to the
chains
empire.
at the end of the day still have to settle to the Cardano main chain, all right. But that's why, yeah, but that's why I say that's the idea and the vision that has been there for a while. But then when you look at various implementations and ideas that have come out along the way, I am not too eager to say this is how they're going to do it because I've seen too many things change from IO internally that I can't begin to say okay this is what they're doing because I've been surprised before. Okay. And so yeah. So that's what I say. Let's say Cardano, whatever multi-chain policy they might end up going with is TBD. All right. But for super ledgerism, I'll say that, or super ledgers, um, but super ledgerism, I'll say that the ecosystem that's better exhibit to this is the Cosmos ecosystem. All right. So Cosmos and all the various Cosmos chains and how they interoperate, the hub spoke or what they call consumer provider chains now.
Right.
That entire framework is exactly what makes a super ledger system, a super ledgerism policy, where there are certain requirements, there's certain standards to meet, such as you need to have fast finality, okay, in order to do IBC. And in order to interoperate, you need to use IBC. Okay. It will be great if you're running Tendermint. Okay. It will be great if you're using the Cosmos SDK or Comet. Tendermint is now Comet BFT. But if you're using that stack, that framework, it gives all supporting systems, all supporting ledgers, peace of mind in how they can, make assumptions and interoperate with you. And that's why the Cosmos ecosystem is very well interconnected. That's why, I think the internet of blockchains is very apt because they've been able to establish standards that allow them to cooperate and interoperate, very, 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 very well. All right.
Bro,
So
building like digital nations out here, dude. Are we
yeah,
building
that
like, I mean, this
that
is
that's
like,
essentially it.
it's the currencies, it's everything that you're building.
Exactly.
It's just
All right.
it's ridiculous because you could have, yeah, with certain of these giant ecosystems, one currency is being used with all these different layers as like the base
Yeah,
currency. It's
yeah,
literally like the EU is a great example, but
yeah. So even on Cosmos, all these different chains, they all have their own sovereignty. They are their own discrete systems at the end of the day. They just agree to have to, exhibit certain properties like fast finality. They agree to leverage certain mechanisms like common BFT, FKA tenement. They make a point to leverage the Cosmos SDK and stick, closely with that. And those are the requirements, all right? Like the EU, the requirement to be under the EU is to literally have your country be positioned in the EU geographical region, European geographical region. Like you can't be in Antarctica and say, oh yeah, we're part of the EU, or you're in Hawaii, like, we're part of the EU. Like, no, you need to like literally be in that area. So those are like some of those requirements, all right? And yeah, you're right. You're rightly put on it. Like you realize that these digital landscapes are their own nations, all right? And it's
with
only when these
with currencies, with
yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right. So Cosmos, for example, the Cosmos ecosystem. When I say the Cosmos ecosystem, I mean that cluster that tends to rely on Cosmos as a certain interconnection hub. Okay, because there's there's the osmosis ecosystem. There's the injective ecosystem. There's every chain has the opportunity. Every chain in that whole Cosmos side of life, they have the opportunity to be their own ecosystem. But the reason why we say Cosmos ecosystem is because the Cosmos hub is like this kind of like the de facto interconnection hub that people would choose to relay messages through and in and out of and that kind of thing. But tomorrow, if Osmosis decides to be a bit more bold and a bit more supportive, or Neutron or Noble, they could say, oh yeah, we're about to, be the next hub. And the reason why you want to run your stuff through us, our hub, is because we give you other properties or benefits or guarantees. All right. But at the end of the day, all of these systems manage their own token. You pay if you move from Cosmos Hub to Injective, you need the INJ token to do transactions. You're not using the Atom token to do transactions. If you move to give me another Cosmos chain, Neutron. Well, Neutron is a special case. I'll come to that later. If you move to, I actually don't know my Cosmos chains very well.
Well, you have Canada, which is a real world example, and Canada has
hmm,
its own currency, but it's
hmm.
like,
It's
it,
still under the UK in some capacity, yeah. The
so
crown in some capacity.
and the currency is a bit different than the euro, right? So
Exactly.
it's kind
Right. And
of like
it's definitely not the pound.
it can have its own ecosystem, but you know,
Exactly. So and good. So and that's also another thing whereby this World Mobile guys, they built their own chain with the Cosmos SDK, and they can choose to either operate in that side or operate some other place. Because having like running on the Cosmos SDK, running Common BFT doesn't automatically make you a Cosmos chain. Okay, it's when you commit to certain policies, only then do you become like a Cosmos chain. All right, I can't call out these policies just yet, but it's more like, yeah, you're running the majority of the stuff through IBC, using IBC through the Cosmos Hub, yada yada yada. But you still maintain your own currencies on the confident. And that's a super ledger system.
hmm.
All right. Now, even within that, you can still have clusters within that. So you have, for example, in the EU, I think there are 27 countries in the EU, but only 20 of them use the euro. Okay, and I'm
Have
happy
some
to be
independent
corrected on this.
currency, standouts. And,
Yeah.
those standouts also have a little bit more maybe gravitas, the ones that I'm thinking of, to
Hmm.
do that. Like there's a bit of something
Yeah, they
different.
have the economy.
Yeah, economy.
Yeah, they have the economy to dare to like not conform to the euro. Okay, they can have. So I think Norway, they have their own currency.
This is crazy.
That kind of,
This
yeah,
is
exactly. All right.
so
So the
crazy.
same thing. So right now, for the most part of the Cosmos ecosystem, most of these systems all run with their own tokens, but there is just like we have the Eurozone, there is this development called the AEZ, that's the Atom Economic Zone, which is a cluster of Cosmos of systems within the Cosmos ecosystem that choose to be much more closer to Cosmos in a certain economic sense, whereby they say you can use Atom as the base token in our ecosystem. There's a lot of things we're going to do that bring back value and demand to the Atom token. And we are putting our systems on the line for that. We want to empower Atom. We want to, be tied to Atom rather than like have our own token or even like just, use some other token as our base, fee currency or something like that, right? So you realize that even within the super ledger, you also have like clusters within there, all right? And so yeah, that's what like one perfect example, right? So the AEZ, just like the Eurozone, the EU, just like the Cosmos ecosystem. And Superledgerism is not just even in Cosmos. So you also have like Avalanche subnet system, all right? Pretty much the same thing.
Okay.
All right. Because they're all subnets at the end of the day. Let me pick another example. Polkadot, parachains.
Yeah, I was gonna
right. Yeah, because even parachains have their own tokens. Subnets have their own tokens. So sovereignty is the key, is like that key property that you use to kind of determine, okay, what does this relationship look like? What does the coupling look like? What do the dependencies look like? All right. And that's how you're able to really kind of separate from superledgerism and separate superledgerism from like ledger expansionism. Right. Now, even let's go back to Ethereum, whereby there's that ledger expansionism policy at play. You look to optimism, okay? And they have a concept called the super chain. Okay. Yeah.
So
the optimism super chain.
Yeah, so it's interesting because optimism is sort of what is that then in this empire? It's kind
perfect. Yeah. So optimism is just another territory, okay, within Ethereum's ledger expansion system. But they are also pursuing their own, their own level, their high level multi-chain policy system, right? That allows all OP stack systems to kind of cooperate, interoperate, akin to what you see in Cosmos.
Would that be like the UAE with like a few different? I don't know. I'm just trying to.
That might be it. I'm not too familiar with UAE setup. I know they have all these like supporting.
As the currency, you can use it in Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and you have a few
Oh,
other.
perfect. But those are all their own like countries, right?
Yeah, they're all well. It's like it's all the. I don't know if they're called countries. I think they're called.
Okay.
I think they're called.
Okay, I'm not too.
I got because provinces.
Yeah.
It's not province, so there must be nations.
Okay. Right.
United Arab Emirates. So you
have because we call them the Emirates. Yeah, we do call them the Emirates.
Yeah, because each of the sheikhs. So each sheikh is like its own nation or country.
Oh,
might be nation or country. I don't know. We can look that up.
You've given me homework right there. That's learning for me. I'm about to like spin up a tab for that. But yeah, no. So I guess that's pretty much it. Yeah. So you have that level of super ledgerism happening on top of an already ledger expansionist policy, where that's the super chain. All right, this coordination and cooperation of all OP stack chains under common rules and policies. Okay, and
just a quick fact check here. So there are 7 Emirates that make up the UAE. So I guess they're called. So it is something. So the Emirates make sense now because I just didn't realize that was a way to label like a different place. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not like
I've always known them as the Emirates. I just say the Emirates. That kind of the same way we say like the states, that kind of thing.
That makes sense.
And so
but you have this sort of, I guess, nation of Emirates. So maybe it's closer. But what's interesting though is I guess the states could be the same example there because you're using the US dollar. But the states are different because the US dollar is used in other places outside. I don't know if AED, the currency of the UAE, is really used outside. So maybe that would that be like, well, I don't know. It's interesting.
I'll have to definitely check and chew onto that because
whatever. It's probably that's very helpful. Not Polkadot, but it's something. It's something.
Yeah. No. You've definitely sent me on a path to do some good reading tonight. But yeah, so you have the super chain arrangement, which is like coordination between all OP stack chains that follow a certain set of rules. One of which is like the governance mission, or what we call the law of chains. So the law of chains is pretty much this like governance mission or this governance agenda, which puts all connected chains, so all member chains, under one
Um,
governance framework. So
yeah.
if base wants to make some changes, it has to consult with, or has to work with the law of chains. All right. And all the other member chains then say, okay, yeah, this is definitely, we should probably make an update ourselves in this direction. So it's a way to ensure conformity.
This is very congruent with your actualized ledger thesis because you're already creating a social comparison or a governmental comparison to the
Yeah.
ecosystems that are out there. So with the actualized ledger thesis, you propose something interesting here that Emmanuel, that you're correlating already to governments, and it works because you have currencies where you are adding this. Uh, I don't know if it's insurance or redeemability, but just social layer to a
It's an amenity.
it's
Yeah. I'm proposing an amenity that allows for recourse.
yeah, with
Okay, that allows
recourse,
recourse
with
and recoverability.
a penalty for
Oh yeah,
user error, but
right.
the penalty is probably spent to running the recourse.
Exactly.
So
Right.
you have like a bit.
Like if think about if you right, like tax evasion, like if you file your taxes wrong, there's a penalty for stuff. Or if you pay your taxes late, these are things that we've done. Like that's why I say everything when you lift your head out of like the whole innovation theater and techno gabble and technical gibberish and everything. Once you zoom out just a bit and you apply a little bit of like philosophy into your life, okay, and you apply a little bit of humanities and societies into your life, and you kind of like use as a lens over what you've been doing. You're like, oh, okay, this is kind
Kind
of
of
what we're
crazy.
doing.
It's kind of crazy. It's
Think
crazy.
about ants. Think about ants. When you see ants on a mound and everything, you just think they're probably ants. And oh my goodness, they're carrying like X times their weight and everything. They never stop. They're always moving and everything. But when you zoom, like when you really put things into perspective, you're like, that's a whole colony. That's a whole civilization right there.
Yeah,
They
there
have a
could be a
queen
couple
and all.
ants doing intercourse somewhere, and you didn't see it at first, and there could be
There's all of that happening
fighting,
right there.
and you could have like a few ants maybe just kind of watching a movie or something, but
Exactly.
you can't see it
But to
unless
us, they're just like ants and that kind of thing. So it's
yeah.
once you're able to kind of give yourself the opportunity to not constantly nerd snipe yourself and constantly just, you know, there's this thing we kind of say in the tech community, it's like a meme almost where we say tech people don't should take philosophy classes or something like that. But this is something that more people should do, and not just philosophy but humanities and societies and law and things which once you learn you become better rounded. I don't know about well rounded, but you become better rounded than if you just know how to write a bunch of code or engineer a bunch of solutions and that kind of thing. And that's a big difference across different ecosystems and different projects out there. I think, you know,
Comparison. It's such a great comparison. It's like it's not even one that I feel is fraudulent because these comparisons are so true. At least like I know that I'm throwing out random countries at you and stuff,
yeah,
but when you look at it as okay, wait a second, there is something to this. You do kind of have an empire with theory of, and you do have rules when you enter that empire, and you kind of look at these other chains that have a bit of we have it all. Like we're gonna
yeah.
and infinite linear scalability in Radix case with with the stack, the Radix engine, Scripto, Cerberus, and all their things that go into the stack in the transaction manifest, the wallet. It's
You realize how much a lot of these things are like implementation detail at the end of the day. And implementation detail is valuable, it is useful, it is required. But once you zoom out, you realize that there's implementation detail, but there's the various concepts and philosophies that rule what we end up implementing. That kind of thing.
well when it does come to, I guess, like what do you think about, let's zoom out for a sec because it
Mhm.
might help us zoom into blockchain. So when it comes to the way that the geopolitics and just we
Uh-huh.
have certain, I think we can take a snapshot of what the world looks like today,
Uh-huh.
and you know it's always shifting, changing, borders are always kind of moving. It
Yeah.
is interesting when you think about the future because there's only so much land, um, unless you're like of the flat Earth theory, where there's extra land above
Right.
Antarctica, or
I
like
didn't even know they had. I didn't know that's how they thought about it. But yeah.
there's like the Hunter x Hunter anime. I think is more
Uh-huh.
appropriate than the flat Earther, where there's like land, like in like past Antarctica, and you have,
Okay.
that's a whole theory. But anyways, it's unless you're of that, if you think that space exists and you think that we've, been to the moon and stuff, there's only so much land. So when it comes to the land that there is, and there's only so many countries with their own currency, and you have the EU. Yeah, like this currency thing, this cryptocurrency thing is actually like a very like introducing that into
Yeah.
developed, a somewhat like pretty developed world. Like we can call
Yeah.
it a pretty developed world, for where things have gone to this point where we have crypto. It's like, okay, fine. There's only so much land left, and it's conquered and there's borders around it if there's vacant land, at least.
Right.
So this is interesting from the standpoint of like the currency war at play here is
Mm-hmm.
subtly happening, and crypto got introduced to it. And you
Mm-hmm.
have the bricks, and you have CBDCs. It is the era of, this is my thesis, dude. This is like the era of currency war. Like it is a
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
real currency war on every,
Cryptocurrency war. Yeah.
not even just, even without crypto, it kind of is.
Without crypto. Right.
And then you introduce
Yeah.
crypto, and
Yeah.
it's like crypto may have some advantages that could actually um, offset certain other agendas, or like, impede them, or actually break them apart, or even disrupt them and be
Right.
adopted. So there's a viral infection, and then within the cryptocurrency sect, now we go back to your thesis where you have different nations that are digital nations developing their own policy around how they're attracting, you know, more uh,
And
to them that will run, their nation, essentially,
yeah.
like
So.
in their nation, or be part of their nation, or already is their nation in the Radix Solana case. And
Mhm.
how far will that go? So it's
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah, what do you think
Yeah.
about this? Like, where do you
No.
think we're going?
I,
Yeah.
I think it's definitely. I think this is in total, it's a great case study of what digital landscapes would look like or can look like. Because when people talk about the metaverse and everything, it's like, yeah, you think of all the shiny stuff, but you don't think about how these things sustain themselves. I like to think that what we've done in the cryptocurrency industry for the past 5 to 10 years has really been a great testing ground to show how a digital world can be made and can be sustained and can be preserved and can be advanced. All right. In more ways than just like the superficial aspects. All right.
Are we just
Um,
getting, are we just making like this digital world ready for AI, so it can just like
well,
live on forever, and we're just gonna,
you never know. You never know. But AI has its
a
own,
lot of work.
pathways. Yeah. And that's why I'll say I'll always recommend to check out OX Park or OX
Oh, the
PARC.
Autonomous Worlds guy, right? Or is that the guy?
Exactly.
Oh, okay. The autonomous.
They've written some good stuff on autonomous worlds. And
Yeah,
yeah, I'll say if you really want to get a good scope of these things, the concept of not the video game thingy. So normally when people say autonomous, they think of video games, they're trying to show you like a game engine or something. Like no. All
right.
right, that's one of many those are one of many autonomous worlds. Right, you can definitely do that, sure. But the concept of it, as it is, that's exciting right there. And if I'm not saying digital landscapes, I'm probably saying autonomous worlds. I just think like autonomous is. I need to see how I feel about that word because,
I agree.
yeah,
I
I need to. I tend to
I
watch
like
the
it,
words
but
uh,
I want to see, dude. I don't know if I believe in it. Like, I like the word autonomous. I do.
right.
Really do, but it's a hard word to grapple with because we're talking about something that it exists. It doesn't live or
Uh,
die, and it does what it does all the
yeah.
time. So it's just doing it's doing its thing all the time with almost no energy. It's self-sufficient in some ways. I don't know. There's a lot of
Yeah.
emotions I
Yep.
feel when I think about
Right.
that.
And when you think of something autonomous, you like to think that all the things that exist in that world will exist or can be predicted to exist. So it's kind of like a closed loop, if you will, such that it's pure, such that there's no kind of impure activity. So when we look at how much we as users and stakeholders and people interact with blockchains, are we really autonomous? Like, is this really an autonomous system, or are we having an effect? Are we having an impact on that? Because,
Is it a you know what's crazy about that? Ants are autonomous in a weird way.
In
We
a weird way, yeah.
could be considered autonomous because even our behaviors and our DNA and free will, you could classify under, creates a flow of actions from humanity that just continues to do things, which has
Right.
always been happening. I've been told since like before humans, you had maybe the dinosaurs, but
Right.
and dinosaurs were autonomous too. So maybe life is autonomous. Maybe life
Exactly.
is like you know what I mean. So
Yeah. And that's why I'm a bit
life is a sacred topic for a lot of people. Like the what is life is the
right.
question for a reason, because it's not one that we can just easily just like crypto bro it out and just talk. Is
Right.
autonomous, is that above what we can achieve, is I guess where I get a little, I don't know, it's interesting.
Right. And that's why when people use the term autonomous in the context of blockchains and cryptocurrency, when they say, "Oh, it's autonomous because like humans are not involved. It's a DAO. It's autonomous. It's a blockchain. It's autonomous. Like we're not like it's a you just press play and it does its thing." I'm like, no, that's not what makes it autonomous. Like else autonomous is
incentives,
probably
incentives can drive the humans to do it, to your point. It's like
exactly right. So you can't use autonomous and try to eliminate the human aspect of it, or the external effects out there. So I look at that word. I still need to find time to really reason around it and probably know what we mean to say or what we mean to express. Because I mean, we say smart contracts. That's another thing, right?
well,
So
Sebastian loves that word. And you know what it kind of feels like though? It feels like one of those I love Sebastian, by the way. It feels like one of those games where you're
yeah,
playing God. You know what I mean? And you're playing God a bit. And to create the autonomous effect, I almost feel like in those games that you're like you're controlling the entire, world, a world
right.
thing. I don't know what a game would be that's good for this analogy, but I know games like this exist. I know my
Minecraft. Let's take Minecraft.
Sure. And you're controlling everything from an omnipotent place, and you're building out for other, I think, for society and humans, I just don't know if that's achievable from like an instinctual, like it's really weird because I haven't even
Yeah.
thought of this before this podcast, but it feels to me as though there's a respect for that word that is like, is that achievable? Can we make the right incentives, or are we always going to not be autonomous to some degree? Maybe
Right.
get close. So I don't know if you feel the same way, but
I feel very much the same, and that's why I don't take that word lightly. Autonomous. I'm like, what do we really mean when we say a DAO is autonomous, or we say blockchain is autonomous? So we use the word autonomous walls, and that's why OX Park, I think they've done some good writing and research to kind of
maybe
flesh that out,
yeah,
as opposed to what I love the game, like because in the VC world as well, there's always like narratives and there's always like buzzwords that you have to use and you can use to, like raise money and then look cool and get mindshare and everything. So I've seen how the phrase or the whole thing autonomous worlds has been used by most projects, and I'm like, you're just saying that to gain VC favor and like markets in favor and everything. But then there is the other thing that it is that you're not doubling down on. So I see some projects, I'm like, yeah, you're not autonomous. But anyway, but essentially, you come to realize that at the end of the day, we are building worlds. These ecosystems are their own worlds. Like our lives, we have second lives in these other ecosystems, be it on Bitcoin, on Ethereum, on Cardano, on Algorand, or Solana, Avalanche, wherever. These are their own ecosystems where we establish our own lives in a certain way. And the best way we record that is on the ledger.
yep.
Our balances determine what way. That's why we call it the world state or the global state, because it's the state of all affairs. How much balance do you have? What kind of history do you have? All that stuff, right? So I like, and that's another thing why I say I had this Twitter argument with this other guy, this other researcher. He's at Scroll. His name is Togrul, and it's still ridiculous to me. But ledgers, as we know them, didn't come out when Satoshi wrote the white paper or shipped Bitcoin in 2009. Ledgers have been a thing for centuries, if not millennia. All right, and most importantly, shared ledgers. Okay, they've been a thing for many, many centuries. Right, banks have used them, royal families have used them. All the only difference is that for all this time, these ledgers were mostly only interactable or updatable, or kind of like, the only people who had administration over these ledgers were like, a handful of entities or centralized entities. Okay, that's how we've had ledgers forever. Okay, you go to the bank, JP Morgan has a ledger. All right, the US has its own ledger of you, or not of you, but like of its entire state. The EU has its own ledger, the UK has its own ledger, even Germany, which is under the EU, has its own ledger, so on and so forth. And all these ledgers, people comply with, people work with. That's how they know, okay, this is how much this country has, this is how much this country has, this is how much we're going to borrow against, this is how much debt's put into, yada, yada, yada. All right. And the only people who are able to, assess and access these ledgers have always been centralized authorities, right, or trusted authorities, right? And that's what we've built institutions for, yada, 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 okay? What we've done differently since '09 is try to remove that centralized element and replace it with a more decentralized element, right? Where anyone and everyone can assess and access, can read and write on that ledger, and it therefore adds in much more confidence, better guarantees, great properties that would allow us to build our lives, our economic lives, at least on those ledgers rather than on JP Morgan's ledger or the US, Treasury's ledger, wherever, right? That is why we crypto.
It is in the central authorities, though. Don't you think that they almost have a weird amount of power in this era,
Mhm.
where like it is a debate of like, man, the legacy systems. It's interesting because they are the central authorities. So all the people are now saying, okay, let's kind of group together and do this ourselves. Let's manage
Yeah,
these ourselves. But these central authorities, and that's probably why it's even happening in the first place, because power must have gotten abused to a point where I guess central authorities have enough influence, power, whatever, resources
yeah,
to um yeah, maybe just scare people from that system to a new one, maybe. But
yeah.
I just wanted to mention something to you because I'm actually more, I would say, ethereal with this, because I really like this societal lens. But one thing that I've come to terms with is with immersive tech and the conversation, the metaverse, right? I actually have looked at that as opening up a digital dimension. So
Mm.
that's how I've kind of framed it. And, when I think about a digital dimension that we are opening up and have access to, blockchain kind of fit right in there, because
Does.
it is like the digital, you said it yourself, you have your own identity on Bitcoin, you have your own identity. And I think that is almost like if we were fourth or fifth dimensional beings in a way,
Yeah,
because that's how
yeah,
I view it, man. Like we
yeah.
absolutely have a non-physical open like portal into this digital dimension that we used our imagination through
Yeah,
evolution to create,
yeah,
and it is now brewing, and it's not
yeah,
going to stop, and we have
yeah,
access to it, and it's
yeah,
only going to grow, and it's
yeah,
like, dude, that's how I've been looking at it for like the past year and a half, and yeah, man, I like these different lenses that you can kind of put on it, because I really like this comparison when you see the rise of the Ethereum empire could be a movie. You could see this
yeah.
be a Netflix series. Like it could be like it could this nation in the digital dimension, or this like monetary trusted authority that's peer to peer actually, or more peer to peer than traditional. I don't know, man. It's getting my mind
Yeah,
going.
because we've been able to now build these worlds or build these ecosystems. Or you hear people like Balaji go network states. Okay. But essentially you build these things, but all the value that is in those places, they need to be tethered, they need to be anchored, All right, and they need to be done so credibly, tamper in a tamper evidence manner, in a essential persistent manner. Because what good is it if you've anchored value to something and that something is like not rock solid? Okay, like
1000%, man. It's
and
like,
for many years, the only way to have that level of like certainty has been through institutions. Okay, so we trust institutions. We trust the bank. We trust this vault. We trust this university. We because there's no way we could introduce verification. We could only trust. Verifying was always hard because verifying requires you going to do all the things that they have to do to be able to know that they can verify. Right? We are trusting on their own verification. All right. So because if I want to go make sure that things are working properly in the treasury, I need to go learn economics. I need to go learn all the regulations that exist, all that stuff. Think about what it looks like if every human being in America has to do that just to understand how the treasury works. And because we don't, we have to trust a certain minority, a certain cluster to do that. Those are the institutions, right? We trust them and we trust them to do it correctly. We can't verify it if they ever mess up. We just hope that they do. That's an assumption.
yeah.
Right? We trust our governments are telling us the truth. We trust our governments are really using our money, our tax dollars for what should be used for, yada yada yada. But we can't verify it. So this new paradigm introduces or takes us away from trust into verify.
And I think it
Okay.
takes us away from the physical in such a weird way where
And
everybody
that too.
where
Right.
where everybody is able to access things without the physical. I think, like, I don't know, it's hard to say, but when it comes, it's like the trusted authorities are in the physical, but now
Mm-hmm.
you have so much
Oh, make, make,
accessibility.
make, make no mistake. You can still have trusted authorities in the digital world. All right. We can still have that, and we still have that in some ways. Um, but the key thing is representation
I think,
of
well, can I just make one more point and hear your take on it? I think the opening of the digital dimension created a level of accessibility that allowed for trusted authorities to be more decentralized is what
right.
I'm trying to like say. And I don't know if that's necessarily true, but I'll tell you why I think it's true because of things like media. It's like yeah, we don't all have to be in the same town to report on
Mhm.
important issues. We're across the globe, but we can still interact with each other, and there's an accessibility there that creates a trusted network of journalists from, talking about the same issue maybe. And I think that same accessibility lends itself to trusted authorities in money, in terms of things like a ledger. And this is kind of rocky because I'm just kind of thinking, but
Put it together,
the,
yeah.
the accessibility of the digital dimension, I think, creates the ability for decentralization to take place more. I don't know
It
you know
it gives a reason for how do I know? It eliminates any reason why that should not happen. So just having a digital space or just providing a digital space does not inherently guarantee that you're going to get much more transparency or that kind of thing. No, no, no. But there are enough elements, there are enough fundamentals, there are enough
yeah,
primitives that you can look at and you realize that, oh, we could do things differently.
and you have
All
the
right.
people get together, group up, and do it almost.
Exactly.
That
The
big
internet is one perfect example. We've gone from only knowing people in our neighborhood to being able to build things and work with people thousands of miles away, hundreds of thousands of miles away. All right. That's what the internet has given us. Imagine if, despite having the internet, all we ever did was only know the people in our neighborhood, only look at the news in our city. Only imagine if, that's an outcome we could have had in the world we have today. But guess what? We had more people who said we could do that, or we could do things a little differently. And that's essentially what Satoshi, the team, the person, whoever they are, that's what they did. They realized that we have the tech and we're still using these centrally managed shared ledgers and everything, well, we could do things a little differently. All
Yeah,
right. And
we had the
that's
recipe.
what we
You know what it was, man? We had the ingredients by the time that Satoshi was around to create a recipe that was
exactly
Bitcoin. And
right.
money itself too. When you think about it, I think I read this in let me think, the Tao Te Ching says this. Okay,
Okay, train.
it,
Doubt.
it says it says if you have it says something to the effect. This is how I interpreted it. Okay, I'll just save myself. It's like the if you had all the money in the world, you couldn't protect it. And I
Yeah.
think that lends itself to the simple fact that money is actually a shared resource and it always was meant to be amongst all the
Mhm.
participants in that economy. And if we're
Yeah.
talking about a global money, then
Yeah.
humanity. And if
Yeah.
you have it all to yourself, how are you going to protect it? Because
Exactly.
who's going to accept it? Like you're not a currency at that point. You're just you own a bunch of one. It's not.
Yeah.
It's almost it loses its value in a way when it's
Right.
not circulating. So
Right. And it damages the ecosystem it's supposed to function in. So money is to people in an economy in an ecosystem with an economy what oxygen is to humans in a given planet. All right. That's what money is in an economy. It's your lifeblood. It's your oxygen. All right. Would you imagine if someone tried to trap all the oxygen, or if someone tried to misuse oxygen, that kind of thing. Right. Money is just as valuable, and so every economy has money. That's that's the fundamental thing. And going back to Satoshi, and also going back to like the thing I was saying, I had this argument with this researcher from the Scroll Project. Where I said, if you think about it, I would dare say that Satoshi never meant to build a blockchain. Okay, he didn't mean to build a blockchain. He meant to build a digital cash system which had certain properties, such as you could be your own bank, or you could exhibit some sovereignty over your wealth, over your monetary policy and everything. There was an overarching system there was an overarching monetary policy. Okay, no one could just print money anyhow. This is the rule. There's 21 million BTC, that kind of thing. He meant to build an ecosystem with a certain laid out economy. Yeah, with certain laid out economic provisions. Okay, and he meant for this to be in the digital landscape. So that was the vision. How do you go from vision to something tangible, something implementable? Okay. And then he realized, okay, he needs to put in certain contingencies. He needs to put in certain measures. He needs to make sure that something's transparent, they're traceable, they're recreatable, so on and so forth. And so in trying to do that, you end up building a certain kind of machine. And this machine we've now come to call a blockchain. Right. I wrote a post about this a few weeks ago, and that's the key thing that we overload the word blockchain a lot, where there is a blockchain and there is a ledger.
yeah,
Okay, or what we call a distributor ledger, or a distributor shared ledger. I like to just say shared ledgers. All right. But the key thing about this ledger is that, unlike the usual ledgers in history that have always been centrally managed, this is not centrally managed. All right.
there's
It's
principles.
distrust.
There's principles that go into why it is the way it is. Let me ask you this though: do you think Satoshi built Bitcoin? Let's just call it that for a second, because he wanted Bitcoin to be always this gold standard of or do you think he did it with the principles in mind to inspire things that would absolutely surpass and make Bitcoin look? I know this is like a controversial question, but
Yeah. Yeah. No,
especially
it's fine.
Bitcoin ETFs. But
Yeah.
honestly, if you were to think about Satoshi and think about his brain, do you think that he actually like has maybe some kind of okay, I'm gonna do this and I want it to succeed, or do you think the goal was to inspire a revolution of innovation?
That is really hard to say,
I've been
like
thinking about
concretely,
it
because
quite a bit.
a lot of his correspondence, like after he shipped the protocol and everything, a lot of his correspondence was mostly on just making the Bitcoin protocol much more robust and sound, and less around like his economic visions and dreams. Like a lot of the things you hear, like, oh, Bitcoin is meant to be digital gold or yada yada, those are things that maxis and all sorts of people have just like
I agree.
polluted the airwaves with, because you don't really get, if I always tell everyone, just go download all of Satoshi's correspondences and the various the various chats and everything, and just read through, and you realize that a lot of his time was mostly focused on just like how he can make the protocol more sound and everything. And we didn't get too much of his like economic visions per se. But I like to think that what he did want to do is, like I said, I don't think he meant to build a blockchain. I think he meant to build a new kind of asset that was an alternative to the US dollar and could even be an alternative to every other currency in the world, such that it could be universal and it could be global. Now, in order to get such an asset, you need to have a ledger that enables that asset. And in order to get such a ledger, you need to tie that ledger. You need to empower that ledger and secure that ledger with certain properties and principles. All right, that cannot be kind of infringed upon by single person or by shoddy work or that kind of thing. All right, so I feel like his work led him to build in a peer-to-peer network of machines that had to track history, okay, to pretty much explain the reason of the ledger and the state of affairs on that ledger, and thereby the ecosystem that would be built on that ledger.
It was built to never. It was built to never fail in the first place, and he had to build it that way because the principles were decided upon because it needed to be something that would disrupt the current framework. Otherwise, why build it like in the first place? Like, why would you build something if it's not gonna? So
it had to be stronger, better, harder than the current framework. It had to be something.
It was never built to. It was always built to not fail. Is the
exactly
thing I've like been thinking like it that is so funny to me.
Yeah. So what? So the question becomes what?
It didn't.
If it fails, you're screwed. Like the show is over. Like, what's the point of all of this? All right. But for you to make it so that it cannot fail, you need to put down a lot of roadblocks, a lot of contingencies, a lot of parameters, a lot of different things to prevent failure in certain contexts. All right. And it's like if Bitcoin becomes a victim of censorship through and through, that's a problem. So what did he do? He said, no, let everyone have a chance to contribute to the network to produce a block. Okay. So like what's the name? Imagine if people's balances were changing on the whim because someone could like change some data somewhere. Like you could wake up tomorrow and all your balance in your Chase account is gone because someone in a lab, someone in an office, someone just hit the button to wipe that off. If the next system, if the better system is able to fall for that as well, that's not good. So you had systems, you had the ledger rules, you have other machines cross-checking everyone's work. Okay, so on and so forth. And it's like, okay, since I want everyone to come in, I also want to make sure that not just anyone comes in, because the bad guys would come in many numbers and try to screw this stuff over. So let's make this, let's add some challenge to them. All right. So what he do is like, hey, the best I have right now is freaking hashing, like throwing proof of work in there. If you do this, I think that you've put in enough cost to not want to screw with the system. All right. And that's all he had at the time. That was the tech he had at the time.
Well, that's why I ask it, because I'm thinking like in some regards, it had to be built in a way that it wouldn't fail. And for it not to fail, it would have to succeed. But I'm not convinced that Satoshi necessarily had a goalpost saying, oh, I want Bitcoin to be the human currency. I still think there's another level between, it getting to where it's gotten today and being this human-wide currency. And I'm just like, it's so fun to think about because I think the approach that you laid out that Satoshi kind of took, where principles guided the innovation, is one that we can kind of like really study and like learn.
Yeah,
it's like almost anti-fragile. I don't know. It was really an interesting approach that turned out you can probably apply it to many things.
Many things, exactly. And so the reason why we have a blockchain is because that's what you needed to build to create a system like that. Correct. To get those properties like that. You had to build something like a blockchain.
You didn't invent blockchain just for inventing blockchain's sake.
No, exactly. No. And that's why I like to think that if I was him, I probably wouldn't have woken up and said, I am going to build a blockchain today. No. He started with I need to solve this problem. And this problem has dependencies. I need to make sure that those dependencies are rock solid. And so it's like, boom, I guess I've built a blockchain. It's like, yeah, that's right. So, and that's why I like to delineate between a blockchain and a distributed ledger. Those are two separate things, okay? Yes, conventionally, every project that has aimed to build a distributed ledger ecosystem, i.e. a cryptocurrency ecosystem, have ended up having to build a blockchain. So it's kind of like they've built their own internal blockchain. So the job of the blockchain itself is to record history. All right, it's to log history and make that logged history be, tamper evident, tamper resistant, censorship resistant. You need to have it's a pathway to write to the ledger. The blockchain is your write access path.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's also your read access path, because in running every bit of history, you can read the different aspects of the ledger. This is a story of the world. Of this autonomous world, we put the story in blocks and we spread it across multiple blocks. And we chain these blocks and we put in enough rows that make it so that you can't fake a block and you can't fake the content of a block. So for this, it's kind of like on this rock, I will build my church.
Yeah. Well,
exactly. All right. So that rock is your blockchain. And on that rock, you build your ledger on top of it. You build your digital landscape. Right. And that's what makes like things like Celestia like compelling. Like, yeah, they're doing the very basic thing. That's Satoshi. Like, if Celestia existed, Satoshi probably wouldn't have built Bitcoin like as a blockchain. He would have built like just the ledger component to run on top of Celestia, that kind of thing. But in fact, don't take that last bit too seriously from me, because But essentially, what I'm trying to say is that
can I kind of jump in there, because there's something really interesting that you touched upon there, dude. Imagine if, I mean, what we should do right now as humans, right, is figure out a way to, I don't know, dig a big hole and put some kind of messages in case the world got wiped out. Because imagine tomorrow, right? It's like, okay, there's humans that like there's 40 humans, and I don't know, they're suddenly our age, whatever. They just exist all of a sudden. And they don't actually know, like, imagine discovering blockchain in a post our humanity world is what I'm trying to paint. So generations after we think humans are extinct, it turns out some survived, and generations after that they build up, and then they discover these records of a past lost world.
Right.
And like giving them ways to like figure out what the heck that means. I just think that we should probably do that now in case any crazy meteor comes.
Exactly so. Yeah, that's exactly what we need, and that's why even in the world
today, we had that, bro. I wish we had some of that, like from past worlds, like some blockchain ledger that, I don't know, just told us everything that kind of happened.
Right.
We should get working on that. Probably. I mean, there's other issues in the world for sure to solve first, but I do think that is something paramount. Like, that's an Elon Musk level. That's something that probably Elon would work on, right? Like, he'd be.
Yeah, it's a thing he should care about, especially if he wants to go spacefaring. So yeah, because that's why you can look at the hieroglyphics and all the stuff like ancient Sumerian texts and everything, and all it gets in is like a certain claim of something that happened or something that worked. But all the bits and pieces, all the history to make this claim viable,
so much is lost. So much.
It's lost. It's all gone. So we usually just have to like accept.
How do we verify if we can't trust? It's like we only have pieces of the story. So how do you, don't trust, verify. It goes back to that again, man. It's so like, it's such a cool time. It's such a cool time to be alive, man.
Yeah, and that's really, and even around the world, even in the physical world, like people are keeping like bits and pieces of files and everything for doomsday purposes. Like these entire nation states which are doing this, and they have a process, so they know that if we have a nuclear fallout or something like that, if they go back to those bunkers to find documents and stuff, they have policies and systems which they put in place so they can verify that this is actually true, because this other bunker here has this and this other bunker here has that, and it meets the rules we set. That's what we've done for blockchains. That's what we've done for digital landscapes. That's why I say blockchain-based cryptocurrency ecosystems. All right. It's a cryptocurrency ecosystem that is based on a blockchain. You can build a cryptocurrency ecosystem right from your laptop. You don't need a blockchain for that. Okay. But we use a blockchain so we can get certain benefits, certain properties, certain guarantees. Right. So when stuff hits the fan, at least we can go back to the chain and look at the history. That's it. It's a history layer. That's what the chain is. And that's something that every blockchain that exists today has built, whether they know it or not. That's why I give Celestia a lot of hell when they come out to say, oh, with the data availability. I'm like, you guys are reselling the one thing that every blockchain has and probably hasn't like expanded on well enough. right? And that's why I'm like, yeah, you guys have the narrative in your control, but how do I call it? If you go to how this is Star Wars. This is Star Wars quote. I can't remember. It's from the old Star Wars books. But pretty much like if you go to a foreign planet or if you go to a foreign land and you're the only person with like a certain leg up on knowledge, you will be treated like a god, or you'll be treated like something is like truly special than it really is. All right. And that's what's happened with Celestia right now, whereby they realized that the industry never really cared about or never really like focus on data availability, all right, or the historic components of blockchains as they function. And so we're going to do that, and we're going to just like sell that. Okay, so that's all they are. That's all they are. They're a historic layer. That's all they are. And that's what every blockchain is. Every blockchain is a historic layer. And every blockchain happens to have its own, dedicated ledger, which is your Ethereum ledger, your Cardano ledger, your Bitcoin ledger, your Avalanche ledger, so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. Right? We could have been built, and that's how Ethereum's rollups are choosing to build now, where they say that okay, we have a blockchain already. That's the Ethereum blockchain. We just need to run a different ledger. Okay, and that ledger is state. Okay, so we're just gonna dump all the history on that other blockchain, and we just focus on our ecosystem.
Right.
All right. Whereas every other, L1, they have to build your own blockchain for their own ledger. And that's where the dynamics go in that
Well, let me go back to something that you said because, dude, you know what makes me kind of sad is when it comes to, okay, I'm really grateful that we have video because there's probably, if humanity is, still around, there's probably somebody
yeah,
in like 100 years that digs this up and
right.
is watching right now. So thank you for watching, as long as it's still hosted on YouTube or whatever. I'll try to host it somewhere safer. But when it comes to language, it's such a barrier because if you're talking about humans in 100 years, okay, sure, like there's history, but when you talk about like a post-apocalyptic, complete rebirth of humans, like when we look back at certain, ancient civilizations that we can't even, we're guessing at what
Yeah.
we're guessing at what they meant, you
Mhm.
know? It's like I think language is such a barrier for passing things through time. So it makes me think about sort of universal languages like shapes, it makes me think about universal geometry. And it makes sense to me, some of the folks that get really into like sacred geometry or geometry. I mean, I don't know too much about it, so just, bear with me there. But I know that there's people that are really into that stuff. And I would think that if there was like, this is gonna be wild, Emmanuel, if there was aliens,
Yeah.
they would communicate to us in
Yeah.
something really universal. So the most universal language might be something that has to do with shapes and geometry and things that are sort of, I guess, just so natural. And I don't know if our language today is very natural or as natural as it should be if we want to preserve things well. And I don't know if numbers are the best like if that's the best way to account and record and pass things on through like eons. So it makes me
Right.
think like, in the principal direction for Satoshi's sake of this conversation, those are two areas that we could totally improve, I think, for how do we pass down information so an infant can grow up in a siloed world and understand it over time.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
that's
It,
I don't know. Yeah, it's
yeah.
interesting.
So I wrote this post the other day, where I said blockchains serve as the substrate that enforce hard diegetic boundaries. This is a word I picked from the Autonomous Worlds paper or article from OX Park. But essentially, to answer your question, okay, how can we have some consistency through time? All right. Think about our world around us. Okay, oxygen. Okay, it's that when you get into water, you need oxygen.
Mhm.
No one has to tell you this. You don't have to learn. Like this is
But what
called.
is water? Like water itself
There
can
you go. That's another
understand
thing.
as different things through language, but through sight and
Right.
feel, it's the same for all of us.
Exactly. So what I'm trying to get at is like in a
Very
world There
Experience
are
is the universal language, maybe. Experience is the universal language.
there's probably a certain element that comes out of
Or
experience that
what are you thinking too? Because I don't want to stop your flow. And it's
yeah, no,
yeah.
I
So
think
you
that
might
in
have a
any
good
world
idea.
and in any life, you need certain hard rules, okay? Or as the folks at Park say, hard diegetic. I can't even say that word properly. I hope I said
Standards? Do you mean like standards or do you mean
it. Standards is one way to put it. I just
margins? Margins, guidelines, margins?
not so these are things that we like when you say standards and guidelines and stuff. This is the kind of stuff that you think that we set. So I'll put them in the more soft diegetic category.
Okay,
These are things that we end up having to set. But what are some of the things that we don't have to set at all? They exist in nature.
I
Oxygen exists in nature. Water exists in nature. Heat exists in nature. There are things that they are always in a certain constant when you interact with them. And no matter where you are, if they do exist in those areas, they will react in that same context. These are like the hard rules that allow you to work with things. All right. So shapes are like one example. Okay. You know that if you pick a circle, a rock with a circle kind of design, and you roll it, it will roll in a certain way. Whereas if you pick the box or a cube and you try rolling the same way, it will not roll in that same way. These are hard rules, but it doesn't matter what planet you're on. Okay, they will always. These are
okay,
hard.
okay, how about this one, man? If you step on snow barefoot, it's gonna feel cold.
It's
It,
gonna feel cold.
so
Okay, these
I'm
are
coming
the
at it.
hard
Yeah,
rules.
from that feel or that experiential language. It's almost like, you know what's funny, dude? Sometimes I'll be talking to somebody and it's not even like we're from the same place or we have like the same dialect or we have completely different even like accents and stuff, right?
Yeah,
But our experiences allow us to communicate in a way that feels so, I don't know, it's more like it makes so much sense because
right,
we have experience, we have shared experiences, or
right,
we have experienced the same thing that we're
right.
connecting on, and
Yeah,
that is communicated almost past language. I don't
right.
know.
Exactly.
I'm sorry to
So
keep going back to experience, but I think it
no,
ties.
no,
I
you're
think it
perfect
ties
for
into it.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. So it's at the end of the day, these hard rules create a kind of a middle ground, a commonality, all right, that allows us to still interact in a certain way. And that's why whatever we're on Mars or Earth or wherever, these hard rules, as long as we recognize them, we will be able to make sense of them, even if we speak different languages. Even if we because there are the soft rules, they're the soft diegetic rules, which like yeah,
Oh, okay.
those
Like
standards and guidelines and stuff.
physics. Like, is it kind of a hard rule?
It's perfect. Yeah,
Unless there's a world out there that like if we're standing it's an upside down world where we just fly
exactly.
up instead of going down and gravity works in reverse
Right.
or something, but
Then your physics has to change.
your
All right.
physics,
Or that world has its own hard rules.
unless there's a world of chaos somewhere where everything changes constantly and that's the hard rule of that world.
That is also its hard rule. That's the
It's also a
constant,
hard
that's
rule.
the constant thing about it.
I know.
So
Isn't that kind of cool? It's kind of funny how
yeah,
that works.
it is. So to talk about like how to have this thin beyond language even. All right. There's some like what they say, like music is a language of the soul. It doesn't matter if you speak the same language, if you hear a song, you're all
Food,
gonna feel a certain way around it. These
food,
are like
yeah.
these are all the hard rules that that fit a certain category. And I like to and OX Park, I say they describe that well with like these hard diegetic, concepts. And on top of that, we build soft diegetic concepts on top of it.
I've only read
So
a few of the.
blockchains,
I've only, by the way, full disclosure, I've only read about a quarter of the OX Park Autonomous Worlds thing. So I know that there's a Sebastian sent me it, so I've only gotten through a few. I do it on video though, so every now and then
okay.
I do like a few.
It's a good
Not
piece of
very
writing.
long, but I don't think it's very long. Like it's, yeah, I can get
No, no.
soon, but that's cool to know.
Yeah.
They touch on hard. So this is good for people to know because I'll post a video soon of the next update of reading through Autonomous Worlds. There is a concept here Emmanuel's talking about where they touch on it. So this is going to be something that now we can look for. And I didn't even know that that was a concept till talking to you. So that's wicked interesting, man. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I like to think, just like I said, as you're going into deep parts of research, you end up having to construct, things as you go. And this right now, I think is OX Park's, experience of having to construct these concepts and these terms as they discover these things. Like, this is what must exist if certain things have to work a certain way. It just has, this is how it makes sense. And so I made a post where I said blockchain serve as a substrate that enforce hard diegetic boundaries within autonomous worlds. Okay. However, these autonomous worlds, well, that's I say they work. I say currently autonomous worlds work with like crude forms of soft diegetic boundaries. All right, because like I said, without governance, it's just a code machine. The world which we are living in is being underused, is being underexpressed.
Can I give you a great example for that? It's going to be like going to a field, but without knowing the rules to, if you got 20 people there and
Right,
you got a soccer ball, without
right,
setting any rules, how are you guys going to play each other? How are you
exactly,
going to play the game without any rules? You're just going to be on the field, everybody's picking flowers or dance or doing something
exactly.
crazy when there's a
Yeah,
perfectly good opportunity to create a framework, have rules, and
exactly.
play a great game. And
Perfectly so.
it's kind of those rules create the activity. Those rules create the thing that exists, almost the thing.
Exactly. It makes you maximize it. It makes you optimize. It makes you make use of it. Because without that, it's a perfectly unused field. And that's such a waste. And that's like the crux of the actualized ledger thesis. This ledger which we've built our lives on with lots of activity, degen coins and everything. All we've ever done is just transition that state from one place to the other. All right. We haven't looked at how we can better turn it on. So in Linux, when you meet like Linux diehards, you tell them, oh yeah, I run Linux. They're gonna tell you, no, you don't run Linux. All right. You're running like the kernel. Um, you're in the Linux kernel, but then there's a distribution you're probably running, kind of GNU distribution or something. Yeah, diehards, they go crazy now when they'll tell you, no, you don't run Linux, right? So essentially, the Linux kernel, you have these things you call they're like core programs that you run on top of the Linux kernel, user space programs. Okay. Now, this user space program is what runs everything you do with Ubuntu or opens the path for everything you do with Ubuntu. Without those user space programs, you just have a kernel that has the opportunity to do certain things, has the ability to do certain things, but you don't have the right framework on top of it to do those things. Okay. Or it's like having a server and having like a server system and not having like a framework for endpoints, like an API schema. Okay, it's like you've done the wiring in your building, but you haven't built the outlets.
I love this approach, man. I really do, because it goes back to Satoshi. It goes back to OK, or was it OKC Park, or is it OK Park?
OX Park, yeah.
OX. Oh,
OXP
it's
RC.
OX. Oh, okay, it's OX Park, because
Yeah.
goes back to soccer. It goes back to life, and it's just this really interesting approach. In a few ways you can look at it. One way is, yeah, I think principles are those kind of hard, uh, what do you call them? Hard diegetic or diegetic,
Diegetic. That's how I say it. I have to play it to hear how it's said properly.
diegetic. I think the principles that Satoshi built, like, or had in mind for building out what Bitcoin is sort of, in a way, those hard diegetic, you know,
Exactly.
lines. And
Exactly.
isn't that interesting, man? Like, it's so
That's
interesting.
that's what he needed to run a world with those soft diegetic, boundaries, i.e., the Bitcoin ecosystem, that digital cash ecosystem. He needed those hard rules, and those hard rules could have only been done with a blockchain, as far as he could build it.
It's like I wonder, bro. I'm not
We're
part of
at the Big Bang. We're at the Big Bang theory of blockchains and distributed ledgers. That's where we are. We've literally time traveled to that moment. Boom, right there, and we're realizing, okay,
exactly,
hydrogen, helium.
exactly,
That's what happened.
no, but that is exactly what
That,
this experience is, because it really is interesting when you think about what is the best way to do things, or like what is the way to do things, maybe is the right way to say it. It's not the
yeah,
best, but it's like, what is the way to do it? And
right.
do anything, you could really minimize or scale it up, but it comes back to this. Okay, principles create those almost I like that you hesitated to use words like margin or borders, and now I understand why. Because it comes back to, okay, why do we need even the idea of playing a game of soccer for soccer to work? Like, why do we even need to have that
Yeah.
framework for us to have fun and play with the ball? And like, kids create hard diegetic boundaries all the time with games that they invent. If you look
Yeah.
at it, when they just play with each other. And when I was a kid, there was a game I played by myself because I was just at home by myself a lot. On certain, I had an older brother, right? He got into his teen years, and it was really tough to convince him to play with his younger kid brother that's like 6 or 7 years younger. It was a bag I would take, his plastic bag, and the hard diegetic boundary was not letting it touch the floor because I would like just kind of flip it up and just try to like punch it so it never touched the floor. And I had such a ball. I had such fun, but that wouldn't have existed without, okay, it's got to be a bag that can kind of float, it's just such a life applicable approach, I
Yeah.
guess is the right word.
That's the whole thing about science. Science, you realize that not everything is by chance. Like, why do cars have wheels? It's not by chance that we're not using like square, wheels or something like that. We realize that, circular wheels actually move in a certain way that actually gets us, to do what we need to do. So you look at what do you need to get what you want.
It
Okay,
took
and that's
us
what
it
like,
took us time to realize that though with wheels. It
yeah.
might take us time to realize that with something else that is better than wheels or like floats or like I don't know, it has some
You're
kind
not
of
gonna put wheels on the sea on the ocean. You're not. Right? Because clearly wheels don't run on the ocean. So what are the hard rules that allow you to move on the ocean? Oh, get some curvature, get some buoyancy, get all those little principles in physics and make it work to run on the water. Okay. If you're gonna submerge yourself, okay, what does your ballast tank look like? What does it, how does it handle pressure and all those things? These are hard rules that you can't just go look at the hard rules for a car and go do that. So yeah, and this is literally this is us, like I said, going all the way
the
to
universal language, by the way.
it's
It feels like we're
exactly
speaking the universal language because it can
yeah,
be, you know why? Because it can be applied to anything.
right. All right. And that's why when people say, build your blockchain to have like 10,000 validators, let them all run. It's like, what do you need 10,000 validators for? Okay. You need a
Ah,
system that can be censorship resistant. You need a system that can allow open global participation. You need a system that can be resistant to tamper. And if tamper does happen, it is evidence because you
right.
can verify.
It's so
You
much
need
more
all these
graceful.
things.
It's so much more
Now,
graceful, bro.
yeah, all right. These are just the things you need. Now, to get those things you need, there are some means to that end. Okay. Clearly, if you create a distributed set of machines, all unrelated to each other, to work together, you can have them get you those guarantees because chances are low on certain occurrences or certain, collusions and that kind of thing. So when I hear people throw the word decentralization, I'm like, it's a means to an end. Okay, are you running your ecosystem such that you're tamper resistant, censorship resistant, open global access? Um, anyone can read it, anyone can write it. Are you getting those properties? Okay, and are those properties not fragile? All right. If you're checking all of those boxes,
Yeah.
you're doing great. Okay. Now the question is, how many things do you need to break down to change that? Or how many roadblocks have you set up to prevent fragility or to mitigate fragility?
Let me
Mhm.
I just want to circle back on that real quick, man, because this is just such an interesting thing here. It's like, gosh, how much inefficiency do things have when you don't take this approach of
Mhm.
first principles thinking, really? But even more than that, a little bit, in my opinion, it's like it's like when you have a goal to just have 10,000 validators, this is
Mhm.
so much inefficiency. It just feels ungraceful to me. It's just not cool. It almost feels uncool to me. It feels like effort is being spent and it's not directed. It feels like there isn't
Right.
any management of that effort. It's just being spewed out there, and that energy is
Yeah.
beautiful energy, and it could go towards a directed path that is much more efficient and create way uh like just actual results, let's be
Right.
honest, rather than just have an arbitrary imaginated goal of like, bro,
Right. Yeah, exactly. And make no mistake, not like 10,000 block producers like fundamental like a faux pas like a taboo or something. But it's like
no, it's a desired thing though by some people. Some people want that like as
they
their
want that. Okay.
as their next,
Right. If that's
and
what
then
you want,
but they build to like they build to have that instead of the actual thing, like the actual thing
right.
that runs, like the actual
Right.
thing
It's
that
like
the validators are validating, and the usefulness of that.
exactly. Okay, like if you want 10,000 validators, you can get that. You can do that. Sure. I mean, your funeral, as I say. But if your reason for doing that is so you can do something a certain way, and we can provably express that you could get that with far less. It becomes a thing of preference at that point. Imagine like you
Yeah,
spend all
then
your days working out and everything.
it's directed energy at that point because
Right.
it's a
It's
part,
like if you
it's a principle. It's a
yeah,
principle of, what it's one of the principles that you're building um, around. How about that? It's one of the principles that you're building around because the principles need to be there, and then you're kind of just like, it's one of those principles. If 10, I mean, I don't, it's tough
do
for me to
10,000
imagine
validators
10,000
contribute to
validators
that
with a
principle?
principle because
Yeah. Are
there's
they the end all be all for that principle? That's the question. All right. You can spend days like working out, becoming this buff bum and everything, and still throw, I don't know, your javelin or your discus in like, in one way and only make a set distance. All right. And some regular person who doesn't work out or anything, but knows the right technique, throws the discus or throws a javelin and makes the same distance as you, or even surpasses your distance. Like, what does that look like to you? You spend days in the gym, you're all brutish and everything, and all you can do is throw your javelin or throw your discus in that direction and in that capacity. When like, little Tim down the street just picked it, knew the right technique, tossed that stuff, and surpassed you. Like, what are we doing here? Okay, and this is something. There's a spectacle of something, and there's the actuality, the practicality of something.
You know why I think that mistake gets made is I think it actually gets made more from the need for us to have some North Star than it does
Mm-hmm.
from the um like ignorance. I think people would take the easy way out in terms of having something to aspire towards quickly
Mm-hmm.
without and just have it be, oh, okay, I want to just I want to get really strong because I want to throw the javelin more and get, I don't know, it feels like it comes from, in this example, it feels like there's some validation problem this guy that's throwing the javelin has, probably
Right.
it's
Okay.
some kind of thing behind the scenes. But if his goal is to throw it farther and he's working out, because maybe that's the only thing that he can attach himself to improvement, because we love
Mm-hmm.
progress. Humans
Right.
actually love progress.
Yeah.
It's what we enjoy. I think like that's creation and progress. Creation is
Yeah.
progress. So yeah, man, I think there's something really interesting about that example with the javelin, because it's like maybe he's attaching to that because he wants a North Star more so
Yeah.
than he knows like the best way to
What
target.
right? What you call a North Star, I like to think I like to refer to as a talking point, or right, or a promotional point. Okay,
Oh, and
these
blockchain,
are
dude,
it's like a vanity thing.
yeah.
Come again?
I said no, in blockchain, do you know, like, bro, there's so many times people are like touting, in my opinion, you know, anybody that's kind of familiar with this stuff's opinion,
Right.
not the deciding factor of a tech stack at all. And they're touting it.
Yeah.
And it's like, why is that the thing that you're
Why?
touting?
Exactly. So that's when, so as opposed to a North Star, I'll call it like a vanity thing, a vanity metric thing. All right. Like, I'm sure you've seen these videos on Twitter where you see a guy, he's like a US Marine guy. He's done all the hard training. And then he goes to meet like a 50-year-old I don't know, Taekwondo or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy or something. And that guy just completely overpowers the guy, the Marine. And I'm like, what, all of that just to get overpowered by a 50-year-old man. Or you see an arm wrestling contest where
Oh,
you
it
see a
depends. But
20 guy.
yeah,
Okay. So
but
it's important to know what you're trying to be able to do versus what you're trying to look like you can do. Okay, or what you look like. So there's a spectacle and there's a practicality. And that's what we tend to suffer a lot in this industry, in the cryptocurrency industry, where people want to look like they are, the shit, when technically, they're not quite the shit, or someone is doing what they're doing for
Okay,
far less.
let me give you actually a different perspective on this because it might be either a combination of three elements or one of the three.
Yeah.
I like the vanity angle. I think that is 100% true. I still like the progress, but not knowing the like not actually maybe doing the first principle thinking to figure out the best way to achieve that progress. I do think people attach themselves to North Stars that are incorrect North Stars. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that could be a reason why this also happens. And then the last one I would argue is a reason why this happens is maybe just ignorance. Like
Well, I'll
ignorance
say
that's not
ignorance falls under subset of vanity. Like vanity only works in the midst of ignorance.
well, that's
That,
fair to argue, but there could be other types of ignorance because somebody that grows up in a world that just never, I guess, showed them the right things that they need, the right ingredients to reach the recipe, may try any, like, may not even try anything to get to that
right.
thing because they
Yeah, I
don't.
see what you mean.
But you're right
Yeah,
too. I liked your point because you're saying that ignorance can be actually umbrellaed under a different type of ignorance, maybe
yeah.
under
You
this
you need
vanity. Like
yeah,
you
vanity
have
needs ignorance. You need to not know something for vanity to look like you see a
for you to
how do I call it?
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you see like a shiny thing and you think, oh my goodness, this is gonna be so great. And then you're like, you did not know that it was trash. It just looked good. All right. Or you meet someone, you see someone who's like, oh my God, like she's hot or he's good looking. And you go find out like they have a trash personality.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, do you
Those are your ignorance is what made you fall for the vanity aspect of things. So, and
okay,
that's why Victoria's Secret magazines, all these places, they throw these men out there or these women out there, and yeah, it's like, yeah, it's
let,
vanity.
let me ask you this then. Do
Mhm.
you think one must in that framework of ignorance, okay, I'll separate it from uh the other flavor of ignorance
Mhm.
because it needs to be in that flavor of ignorance,
Mhm.
awareness seems to be a recipe for solving for vanity or wanting vanity instead of principled thinking or
Yeah.
principled thinking to understand what to actually what ingredients to chase. It's like,
Right.
do you think that one must go through ignorance then to uh, to go to get to that point where they can actually have the principled thinking?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we all start from a place of not knowing.
That's
What
hilarious.
we know is a drop, and what we don't
Yeah.
know is an ocean. So everyone, no matter where, what field, wherever, we all start from a place of ignorance, and the difference is the thirst and hunger for knowledge. Having that curiosity, having that wanderlust. That is the element that gets us out of the cave. Okay. Like, the concept of like Plato's cave. We're all in that cave. We all start in that cave. Okay. But the difference between us staying in that cave or getting out of that cave is us wanting to seek knowledge, us wanting to ask questions, us being curious. So, you know, yeah, we all start from a place of ignorance, but that should not be a finality. That should be a stage. All right. And we need to have a path for that. We need to enable that path for getting out of ignorance. And that's why, but you will find worlds, you'll find places, you find communities, you find ecosystems that make it part and parcel of their lifestyle to not allow curiosity, to not allow that questioning, to not allow that knowledge seeking. Okay. And that's when you have a problem.
Well, you know
All
what's
right.
funny about like my reaction to that is absolutely I agree. Part of me almost feels like there is more paths to I think getting out of that cave. And I'm not saying that like they're like that the path you just described isn't the correct one. I just also feel like there's other maybe paths to reaching that awareness. And the only reason why I say it is because
Oh yeah,
my,
true.
my bio is literally self-proclaimed knower of nothing on Twitter. And I
I call
like,
myself a noob.
yeah, yeah. No, well, I mean, this is so meta, man, because I almost feel like when you are when you are kind of marinated in ignorance and constantly marinated in it, it opens up, and this is the philosophy behind at least my bio, but I could probably share, I probably share similarities with Emmanuel here. It's like almost, I don't know, it's kind of just like I like to marinate in that because I know that that's what leads to more awareness. It's like
I think you're not marinated in ignorance. You're marinated in curiosity. Curiosity is that which you'd
we're not
marinate in.
knowing,
So
not knowing, right? Not knowing is I think, is the interesting part about it because when you don't know what you don't know. Do you
if you're
automatically
right,
have curiosity, or does curiosity come when you start in that place of not knowing? So,
curiosity comes out of a discomfort of not knowing, because there are people who are comfortable in
like,
not knowing. You know what they say, like what you don't know doesn't hurt you. Okay, that is comfort in not knowing. Discomfort in not knowing is curiosity. All
yeah,
right. So that so you bask in curiosity. You bask in knowledge seeking. You bask in questioning. That's where you are.
but to have that, to be able to
Mhm.
access curiosity, I
Yeah.
almost have to marinate in the unknown or not knowing, a state of not knowing, and feel that discomfort, bro. And
Yes, you have to feel that discomfort
you
for you
have
to
to do
shut.
it. You have
It's
to do
it's
it.
either that,
You know what?
and that's what.
Discomfort. It's probably to the ego. That's where the discomfort maybe is, because when you're in a place of not knowing, you're kind of just figuring it out, and you're like, I don't actually know. Let's explore this because this is kind of bothersome because I want to maybe, I don't know. It's really interesting, man. It's been a really
Yeah,
interesting
and
combo.
besides curiosity as well, adversity is another thing that drives one out of the state of ignorance into a state of knowledge seeking. Adversity. Okay. If every day your house is getting flooded from the coastal, from the water just by the coast where you live, adversity makes you ask yourself questions. When you realize that every day you have to walk, you know, hundreds of miles just to go get to school, you start that's adversity as well. Right.
They are
So there's
actually,
curiosity and there's also adversity.
I think they're two sides of the same coin, and I'll tell you why.
Probably. It's
One,
discomfort at the end of the day. Yeah.
well, I'll tell you why. It's because one is almost coming at you,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yes.
one, it's almost self-discovered or self-proclaimed, in my opinion. Like
I
not
like I like I
not
like how you put that. One is coming at you, that's adversity, and one you're actually reaching out for. That's curiosity. Yeah.
with
Actually, that's you're actually on point with that. Yes.
with not knowing too. It's like a weird thing because
There's a comfort in that
you,
too. Yeah.
well, I think though with not knowing, as soon as at least like when I think about not knowing in my experience with it,
Right.
at least with me, as soon as you're aware that you don't know, if you don't know that there's a monster in the closet, if you don't know, you're attracting already going to maybe like figure it out, or like at least pondering what could be in that closet, or
Yeah.
the dark alleyway or whatever. It's like
Yeah.
there's an attraction to it, and then there's almost this like, I don't know, force that comes with adversity. So I
Yeah.
think you're spot on to also put that, and I put them in this, like I almost want to put them two sides of the same coin, or maybe it's a cube and there's four sides and we're only talking about two. I don't know, but it's funny how you have that repulsion or like that force, and that, I don't know, it's very magnetic, I think.
Yeah. So not everyone can get the chance of that. Like there's some people who live ignorantly their whole lives and they're fine. They're perfect. It's a simple life. That kind of thing. There are those who live in discomfort every day trying to search knowledge. I think some call that neuroticism in some capacity. And then there are those who, there are those who don't know what they don't know they don't know, and there are those who know they don't know, and there are those who know they don't know, but they're fine with that as well. They're comfortable with that as well.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, and
You
just
know what
circling
else?
back to
Dude,
uh-huh.
curiosity, who did it kill? So there's adversity that can come from curiosity. because you could be curious as a cat, get killed, or you could get hurt. And curiosity, it's one of those I think I like the danger of
And
curiosity.
I think that's what we say. You can either learn it the easy way or you can learn it the hard way. Okay. Learning it the easy way is you actually doing your reading and doing your research and actually asking and everything. Learning it the hard way is when you're like, shit hit the fan. I had no choice. I had to figure this out. Okay. Like this is what had to go wrong. Remember your private keys, right? Like prior to that, you'd say that you never really bothered too much, but that adversity had to happen for you to realize that, oh, snap. I now need to fucking like freaking not let this happen again. I need to know how to not make this happen again. That kind of thing. And that's what happens with blockchains and even with rollups and all these things. So there's L2 beats out there, which kind of shows you the stages of a rollup and lets you know, okay, what comforts and guarantees you can have when you use rollup A versus rollup B, that kind of thing. There's some people who never care about that until something goes wrong and they need to exit their funds out and realize, oh shoot, we don't have an escape hatch in this rollup. Okay. Or they're like, oh yeah, blockchain is super fast and everything. And it's like, technically it's like 27 people who run this thing and they control your life. It's like, I didn't know I needed to know this till stuff hit the fan and these 27 people completely took all my money away. That kind of thing. So you have social layers that, that choose to be ignorant. There are those who constantly seek knowledge, and there are those who like have to deal with adversity to learn stuff. Right? I'll say Solana, for example. For every time the chain, had a hiccup, I'm sure like it made more developers, more users try to know why that stuff happened to the chain and why the chain works a certain way. Right? That's adversity that taught them stuff. Right? You have the Ethereum community where they're constantly curious. Okay, they constantly chase after different research missions and agendas, right? And that's the curiosity right there. And you have some other ecosystems who are like, nope, we are perfectly fine because they built the best technology in the world. We had a top tier researchers. Why question them? Okay, let the chips fall where they may. It's like no. I'm in a perfect system.
This is perfect for blockchain. It's like You know what I think, Emmanuel? I think with adversity, I would rather be the cat and
Mhm.
be curious and get killed because
Yeah,
then wait for adversity to find me. And what I
yeah.
mean is this: if I'm in blockchain and I'm in
Uh
an
huh.
ecosystem and I'm not doing my freaking research, man, and that ecosystem, it's got this great community, and I'm a human, so maybe it's a crowd, mentality, mob mentality. Okay, sure, guys. Okay, perfect. The blockchain is the secret god of blockchains, the best one. And wait there until adversity hits. I'd rather be in control of my own destiny and go seek information and like
Right.
figure the heck out what's going on. Even if I get a little bit, even if I get thrown around in some waves, even if
Yeah.
I get kind of like maybe scratched by a tiger, or like
Yeah.
even if I get just kind of like, because
Exactly.
at least there I know that like I'm not just waiting
Right.
for adversity.
Exactly. And
It's interesting. Adversity is so dynamic, is what I
it
guess
is.
in a
It
picture.
is. And the kind of cat you end up becoming? You end up becoming a wild cat. Okay, cat that knows how to thrive in the wild, right? That's learned some hard lessons and
So,
everything. Compared to domesticate a cat, which they've never had to deal with that stuff. And you're like, yeah, we have these people for that. And not everyone will be a wild cat. Okay, as more users come in, some users are just gonna want some ease of use and comfort in their
most
life and
most
everything. Yeah,
would you
most,
say that most
unfortunately.
is most of humanity domesticated, do you think? Like,
The last 10 to 20, no, the last 20 to 30 years have geared humanity towards comfort and convenience. So when I was in high school, and this is what made me know that I would probably want to work in cybersecurity, because I said that at the time I said the past 10 years has just been convenience in our technological landscape. We have something like you want to get a car, there's an app. You want to get some food, there's an app. There's all these things. Like when your car breaks down, there's AAA. You don't learn how your engine works. You don't learn, how to change a tire. All these things. Okay, there's a certain like simplicity and convenience. I said to myself, I was like probably 16, 15 at the time. I was like, we're in the age of convenience. I was like, where the money is gonna be in the age of security. The people who would have to ensure that convenience stays convenience. The people who have to keep the bad guys out. I thought that's where you have to pay
I like
us.
that. That's smart.
You have to pay us so you can keep your peace. And yeah, unfortunately, that has permeated civilizations as we know it, at least the developed world. And all the people who are going to come from, the developed worlds into blockchain, they're going to want that simplicity. And that's why I say time and time again, the people who would better align and better simulate with blockchains today are the people from where I'm from, right? From
Like,
my from my
they're a
from
little
my
bit
country.
rough around the edges, do you mean? Or do you just
Yeah,
mean like in undeveloped, like
undeveloped. Like we know what it's
rough
like to
around the edge, like
deal.
people are explore like people that are not from these developed nations in your comparison where there's a lot of domestication from convenience. Or there's
Exactly.
whatever's, but maybe it's interesting, man. I think you're
Yeah.
right. I think you're
I
right.
mean, take a trip to a place like, so I was in DR just a few days ago for like a holiday trip. And you meet people who are ready to do business with you on every level. It's like you have PayPal, you want a Cash App, you want a cash, you want US dollar, you want DR dollar, you have £1. They will work with you. Okay. Come to the US and say, oh, I'd like to use PayPal to pay. Like, no, bitch. Give me my cash or use Zelle, and that's it. Okay. Well, that kind of thing, like that's the difference you get right there. You have like, and to someone who's all about convenience, they look at all these optionalities and like, why do I have to worry about all these things? And so blockchain as it is, a lot of the perks and benefits that it produces are lost on
You know where it comes
developers.
from? I think it comes from consumption because sometimes, man, I'll be going like maybe to grab something and instead I just do more with less, or I'll go
Right.
like you ever go fishing or maybe like I don't know, just do like more with less and you feel good about it sometimes. And you could have gotten more, you could have waited in a line, you could have got aggravated about waiting in a line, you could
Yeah.
have got maybe, some kind of food that was prepared for you and stuff. I
Yeah.
don't know, like it's almost like more comfortable in the end when
Yeah.
you
But
can
make no
go out
mistake, like
and grab your own stuff. Like it's almost
exactly.
that's what creates comfort in some ways, I think, for some people. It's like
Exactly.
yourself in a way for
Right.
consumption at a convenient level. I don't know. There's something to that where the effort makes the ease, or the effort creates the ease. It's like it's some
Right. But there's also make no mistake, like that comfort and convenience isn't inherently wrong or bad or that kind of thing. In
no.
fact, it's a product of a good system, of a certain good system.
I agree.
Okay, that's the benefit of a certain kind of good system,
It's
or
so
arguably good
yeah.
system. All right. So, and have you seen this meme where we say, war times create strong men create peace times, peace times create weak men create war times, and it's all over again. It's this meme we have out there, but that's essentially it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you become domesticated from peace times, right? The largest burst of technological advancement came from the World War.
And in peace times, you have what? You have more convenience, maybe
All
convenience
convenient stuff.
rises.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
convenience rises in peace times, and that's part of it.
yeah, exactly. You have more people think about how to build the next, I don't know, dating app over how to build the next, top level encryption system.
Yeah.
Okay. We in crypto, I could throw a number of different names as people who build in crypto, but we live adversarially. We build adversarially. We build like we're in a wartime. All right. Like, why the hell are you trying to build something stronger than the default cryptography that the whole world uses?
Yeah.
Okay, but that's the industry we're in. And that's why the world will find it very hard, or
Like
just the general world out
BlackRock,
there.
like I know
Yeah,
you're from the, in my opinion of this stuff is sometimes I don't know, like I don't know how corrupt things are, but
yeah.
it certainly
But that's
feels
a
like
convenience.
it seems like there's a lot of corruption sometimes to me, and I could
Mhm.
be wrong, but it puts some like because again I don't know, it puts some kind of like unsafeness to it that I also agree. Like, I want to figure out, what is going to be the system that provides us some of the remedies that I believe blockchain could
Right.
provide, right? So that's
So
why
so
I'm searching probably in certain things, like searching for what's going to be
yeah,
big, not now, but for solving the bigger issues here. Voting, um, you know, digital identities that are self-sovereign, on-chain voting, things that are, I don't know, like not even
yeah.
that I'm making a moral judgment on, but I could see how there, could be some systems taken advantage of. And I think
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And just this whole thing, like even someone, if you have like a bank account or something, it's comfort versus discomfort. All right. And if the path to discomfort, as we've already talked, curiosity, adversity. If your bank isn't censoring your transactions, you're fine. You're living your life every day. You're good. Remember the Canadian truck drivers?
yeah, with the Bitcoin,
Well,
and they got
no,
their bank
like
accounts frozen.
they got their bank accounts frozen for protesting and everything, all right? Until that moment, they probably had complete faith in their bank accounts. Like, no, but after that, they had to ask themselves,
They
how
had
can I not
Bitcoin
let this
after that.
happen?
They had Bitcoin after that because people, I think, sent them Bitcoin. Correct? That's
Okay. The minimal bit of the story I know is that from protests, they were identified and word was sent out to have the accounts frozen.
yes,
That
that's
kind of
correct.
thing.
Yeah, that's the story that I've heard too. But I heard that
Right.
people that supported them, I
People
guess,
supported them with Bitcoin after that. Exactly.
Bitcoin.
You
Yeah.
know,
So they
that's
had
when they
Bitcoin.
realized that in this adversity, Bitcoin is a solution. Now, prior to this adversity, I wasn't curious about it. I didn't give a damn about Bitcoin. But adversity is what made me care about Bitcoin, that kind of thing. And you have the other people who like, yeah, like they will tell you, like, dude, you should have known, like Bitcoin would have been the place to put your money instead of the banks. So you have those two results right there. I'll give you a personal experience. Like I moved to the US, I'm applying for college, and they want me to bloody take like English as a second language and take like math and a bunch of, and I look at them there, I'm like, do you know the things I have to do like to excel as a student in my country? All right. And I had to test out. All right. I had to literally, so I effectively tested out to like pretty much my first year. Okay. I was like, give me the test, I'll take them out and I'll show you I do not need to be put in these classes. But I could have avoided all of that if I had a verifiable system to just transport over and say, run the checks, check the proof, verify. There you go. You know that I am competent in algebra, trigonometry, all these other different things without me having to sit down and write a test to test myself out of it. Okay.
That's one of
These are the
those
things that
things.
drive me.
That's
Because I know that I can now go back, have secondary schools implement these various concepts. So when they come to the US in the future, wherever they go, they can just say, here's my DID, or here are my verifiable credentials, or here is proof of my work. All right. So these are things, like I say, they always remain at the back of my mind in terms of why I give time and dedication into this space. Right. For someone who lives in the US or Canada, you guys already have standardized tests and everything. So, you don't have to do any special things. All right. You can write an SAT and you're good to go. And you go to places that accept SATs. But if you come from a place where they don't do SATs by default, or they don't, you have to, you have issues. So comfort and discomfort are, the two, that's what will determine, how you progress. And adversity or curiosity is what would offer
Well,
you a path out of comfort to discomfort.
I really do think for me, it's still, I don't know, just the basking in the unknown that
Uh-huh.
leads to maybe discomfort, maybe you're right, but also just like what is over there? and, and, and,
That's
and, and
curiosity.
that
That right, that's
curiosity,
curiosity. You asking what is over there. That's why I say you're basking in curiosity.
I
That's
don't know
where
if
you
it
are.
necessarily
Yeah.
has the discomfort in between, but I think sometimes it does. So I think it's like, it's interesting. I'm just, it's hard to pin these things down. But what I will say is this. With something like what you just described, standardized testing, I would almost look at that same thing here in the West and say, well, we do have a problem that this same solution can be applied to. And I'll tell you what it is. It is right now, colleges, there's a
Uh-huh.
big debate happening, right? It's like, well,
Interesting.
who should really be certifying people's academic, post secondary school, right? Or
Mhm.
I think that's what you guys call it. Is high school secondary
Yeah.
school?
High school for you guys, yeah. Secondary school for us, yeah.
Okay, because okay.
Yeah.
So post secondary school, can we create more of a competitive landscape for things like doctorates and things? And for that, creating more competition there, do you need all the overhead that we're seeing colleges have and the costs? And can you actually bring that down some ways? So verifiable organizations that could start to pop up and have track records with their students, how well their students perform at jobs and history, maybe elevate them in the rank against other, Ivy League schools.
Exactly.
In 40 years from now, I think it's a potential disruptive moment that you could have things like DIDs, things like trackability of, careers and progress in terms of a
Right.
teacher's record. like a teacher's record or a group of teachers' records that are outside of maybe an institution. I think that that is also an area for disruption to your earlier point around.
Yeah, no, and that's why I actually wanted to stop you there because you said something very valuable in there where you said verifiable organizations. That right there is the big difference between the world we've known and loved and the world we've ended up building in blockchains. We've only had trusted organizations,
which have
right? Or trusted institutions.
which have
Okay.
track records, man. We don't have a
Which
track.
have to, and that's why we trust them. Okay. We are moving from trusted institutions to verifiable institutions. And that's why we go back to the actualized ledger thesis and you have your various departments and you have that one department that would check your disputes and everything because it's verifiable.
I hear you, man.
So in the old world, we work with trusted institutions. In the new world, we work with verifiable institutions. Why? Because we can. We have the perimeters for it. We have those hard diagrams boundaries for it.
Vehicle to bring it back. We have the vehicle, dude. We have the vehicle to do it.
Yeah,
We can have
exactly.
we can have more competitive landscapes. So it's really interesting. Emmanuel, let's close this down. Let's wrap this up. But dude, this was all a 3 hour, almost four, is it?
Oh my goodness.
It's almost a 4 hour podcast, so we'll probably chop it up. I'll post the whole thing, but I might bring up some clips and stuff. We'll see. It's funny.
Oh my goodness.
But I will say this though. Listen, man, I think you just keep doing your thing, and I really like the way that you think about some of these things. And yeah, you might get some backlash with your whole, but that's not if you can always send them here to this podcast. But there's a lot of nuances, and like you said, I like how you said that there's things to kind of I say paint another layer of paint on the wall, but there's other ways to say it. Nonetheless, the way that you can look at things through different lenses. I liked our riff on universal language, and just different concepts there that are way more, I don't know, just abstract. I think with abstract, we could even talk about where you can find valuable insights through things that are abstract for like another hour, but we're not going to. We'll have you back on though. I'd love to do this again, man. We'll have to do this again. We'll have to do this again. And we'll do it in a place where we both evolved. So there's even more thoughts that we can kind of contribute to this ongoing flow. Anything that you want to say to kind of make your exit on, because in case somebody's watching that's 100 years, or maybe we figure it out and it's 1,000,000 years, and they're just finding us buried under the ground in like some device. What do you want to say to people that maybe don't hear from you for a bit?
Okay, I'd say question everything.
Amen.
Know your mental models and know how to make them better. Learn how to learn. Take anything you get in one hand and open the book with the other hand. And I think that's about it. I think that's really it. Just go out there and research, seek, and if you can build. And if you can't build, teach. That's it. Yeah.
Maybe go experience both curiosity and adversity.
Yes. It's a blessing. That is a blessing on its own. Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
All right, man. Well, I'm going to pause this and say my goodbyes, but that's Jspeak podcast. The long one, great one, fantastic one. Probably my favorite so far, honestly, because we just went. Usually they're a little bit shorter. We don't get to go into the life stuff. We don't get to go. I had a lot of fun, man, but we'll see you next time on the Jspeak podcast. Peace out, everybody.